Perry March was born in 1961 to Arthur March and Sephora. He and his wife, Janet, were complete opposites of each other. He is ordinary, but his wife was a very bright, beautiful woman, dreamy and talented. Janet grew up in a wealthy family, as the daughter of a well-known lawyer from Nashville. Janet and Perry met as students at the University of Michigan in the early 1980s and quickly became inseparable. When Perry graduated and moved to Chicago to work as a financial broker, Janet followed him without hesitation. However, she soon began to miss her home and family. To support Perry's education, her father agreed to pay for his expensive tuition at the prestigious Vanderbilt Law School. As a result, Janet and Perry returned to Nashville, and since Perry was hesitant, it was Janet who proposed to him in Percy Warner Park. They got married in 1987 and moved into a house in a well-known area of the city, which was rented and paid for by Janet's father. The following year, Perry graduated and chose to work for a local law firm in Nashville instead of accepting offers from large firms in New York. In 1990, Janet gave birth to a son named Samson, affectionately called Sammy. On the surface, this family seemed to have everything: a mother, a father, and a son. Unfortunately, this outward appearance of happiness was deceptive. In 1991, a scandal emerged at the law firm where Perry worked after a young female specialist received an inappropriate proposal from a colleague. A stranger sent her a letter expressing his attraction to her and his desire for an intimate relationship. Feeling embarrassed, the young woman reported the incident to her boss. After this, 2 more letters arrived, urging her to respond to the proposal by leaving a message in the firm's library. In response, the firm took measures to identify the sender of these inappropriate letters. They installed a CCTV camera in the library where she was supposed to leave her reply. When the man came to collect the letter, the firm's lawyers were shocked to discover that he was Perry March, the husband of Janet. Faced with evidence from the video, Perry refused to confess. The law firm gave him an ultimatum: resign or be fired. He chose to resign. This uncomfortable situation led to legal consequences, as the female employee who received the unwanted proposal sued Perry for financial compensation. He was ordered to pay her. To avoid a harassment claim, she requested $25,000, half of which Perry was to pay in monthly installments, while the remaining $12,500 was to be paid in a lump sum. This arrangement was made to keep his wife, Janet, from discovering the scandal. In 1994, Janet and Perry welcomed their second child, a lovely daughter named Sephora. As their family grew, they decided to build a larger home and purchased nearly 2 acres in the affluent suburb of Forest Hill. Over the next year, they worked on constructing their dream house, a $650,000 mansion designed in the French country style. Janet was very enthusiastic about the project and closely oversaw every stage of the construction. However, her demands were sometimes unreasonable, leading Perry to step in and help mediate between her and the construction team. Although the new house brought excitement, Janet and Perry's marriage was facing difficulties. Their relationship had been strained for several months, and they frequently attended therapy, both together and individually. At home, they rarely communicated. Perry was often away for at least 3 days a week, and their arguments escalated whenever he returned. A family therapist suggested they take a break from each other, but Janet was adamant about getting a divorce. In August 1996, a significant incident occurred that changed the course of Janet and Perry's relationship forever. Perry needed to pay the final installment to a woman at a law firm, but, due to financial issues, he sent her a letter requesting to postpone the payment until October. Unfortunately, Janet read the letter, which led to a heated argument between them. In the aftermath, Janet contacted her mother to arrange a meeting with a divorce lawyer. On August 15, 1996, Janet was scheduled to meet with the lawyer but never arrived at the office because she mysteriously disappeared that night. Perry claimed that Janet left voluntarily after their argument. He told the police that she expressed a desire to get some space to think but did not specify where she was going. He said that at around 8:30 p.m., Janet packed a suitcase, took her passport and $1,500 in cash, and left in her car. He also mentioned that she left him a list of tasks to complete before her return. After she left, he informed friends and family of her departure as he normally would. The next morning, Deneen Beard, the maid, came to clean the house and was surprised to find everything in order. However, Perry asked her to focus on her work and not to go into the children's room. Then a nanny named Ella Goldschmidt, who had previously arranged with Janet that her son would play with Sammy, arrived. After Deneen left, Ella noticed Sammy jumping on an oriental rug that was rolled up on the floor next to the playroom. When she returned around 2 p.m. to pick up her son, the rug was no longer there. Initially, Janet's family believed Perry's explanation. Janet's father went to Nashville International Airport to check if Janet had left her car there. Janet's mother, Carolyn, became increasingly worried, as her daughter would not just vanish without a word and would never abandon her children. Although Carolyn wanted to contact the police, Perry convinced her to wait 12 days, claiming that Janet had said she would return by then. That evening, Perry called his father, Arthur, a retired U.S. Army lieutenant colonel living in Jalisco, Mexico. Arthur readily agreed to travel to Nashville to support his son during this challenging time. In the meantime, Janet's family's concerns continued to escalate. With August 25th being Sammy's 6th birthday, fears grew that something had happened to Janet. She would definitely not miss such an important occasion. While Perry and Janet's parents told the party guests she had traveled to California to visit her brother and was postponing her return due to an ear infection, her sudden disappearance raised alarm among her loved ones. Days passed without any news from Janet, and the anxious waiting could not go on much longer. On August 29th, Janet's parents reported her missing to the police. Detective David Miller, a skilled investigator with extensive experience, was assigned to the case. He initiated the investigation by reaching out to hospitals and reviewing Janet's bank and credit card accounts, which had not been used since her disappearance, raising concerns about her well-being. On September 7th, authorities located Janet's car in a parking lot at an apartment complex about 5 miles from her home. The car appeared to have been parked there for several weeks. Inside, police discovered Janet's bag, which contained her documents, passport, credit cards, and $11 in cash. They also found a suitcase filled with clothes, notably absent of a bra, toothpaste, a comb, or underwear, which seemed unusual. Additional evidence included a pair of white sandals in the glove compartment and unusual, dirty bicycle tire tracks near the car. Investigators needed to analyze this evidence carefully. On September 10, 1996, Perry was questioned by investigators and consented to a search of his home. The police conducted the search over the weekend of September 14th to 15th while Perry was away in Chicago with his children. The house showed no signs of domestic violence or anything noteworthy. A few days later, the owner of a tire store contacted law enforcement to inform them that Perry had visited the store on August 21st, a week after Janet went missing. Perry inquired about purchasing a new set of tires, despite the good condition of those already on his car. When asked why he wanted a different brand, his response raised further suspicions. On September 18th, Perry decided to move to Chicago with his children. Before leaving, he had a concerning conversation with Janet's longtime friend, Diane Sachs, which she later reported to the police. Perry asked Diane if she thought he could kill his wife. Although she hesitated to answer, he proceeded to ask the disturbing question of what she would think if he had loaded Janet's body into his car and taken it to a remote location for disposal. This raised serious suspicions about him. As a result, the police launched a comprehensive search for Janet, involving divers, 2 helicopters with thermal scanners, specially trained dogs, police officers, and volunteers. Meanwhile, Perry hired a lawyer, who informed the police that Perry would not cooperate with the investigation. In November, as Janet's parents held a day of mourning for her, Perry chose not to attend, further increasing the police's suspicions about him. Over time, a theory about Janet's disappearance began to develop. It was suggested that Perry and Janet had a heated argument the night she disappeared. During this argument, Janet may have said something that provoked Perry, leading him to strike her hard. Given that Perry held a black belt in martial arts, a single blow could have killed her, or he might have strangled her. Whether intentional or not, when he found Janet dead at his feet, he was faced with a dire decision. Investigators believe that Perry hid Janet's body either in the basement, in the woods, or near their home. Furthermore, Ella had mentioned that there was a rolled-up rug that she had noticed in Perry's house that morning. Janet's body may have been inside that carpet, and tragically, little Sammy may have unknowingly played around his mother's body. Afterward, Perry moved her body to his Jeep and drove to a location where he buried it. He then drove Janet's car to where it was later discovered, taking her mountain bike with him so he could ride it back home. However, these are merely speculations, and the police were tasked with uncovering evidence of the murder, marking a new phase in the investigation. Janet's father, a prominent lawyer, was determined to uncover the truth about his daughter's disappearance. Meanwhile, Perry applied to become the manager of Janet's estate, but her parents opposed this and filed their own petition. Perry refused to consent. Ultimately, the court designated a guardian to oversee Janet's property and ordered Perry to return some items he had taken. He only returned them after being urged to do so. This was just the beginning of a legal dispute between Perry and Janet's parents. The battle continued until late 1999 when the court granted Janet's parents the right to visit their grandchildren. They traveled to Perry's new home in Illinois, eager to see the children, but were shocked to discover that he had moved to Mexico to be with his father. Moreover, just weeks after relocating, Perry married a local woman named Carmen Rojas. 3 years had passed since Janet went missing, and she still had not been officially declared dead. This prompted her parents to file a lawsuit against Perry for the manslaughter of their daughter. When Perry did not appear in court to contest the charges against him, the judge ordered him to pay $113.5 million in compensation to Janet's parents in May 2000. Janet's parents traveled back to Mexico to confront Perry and requested to meet his children. He firmly refused their request, prompting them to return to Nashville. A month later, they returned to Mexico with a court order and assistance from local police, who arrested Perry for violating his visa. Although the charges were eventually dropped, by the time Perry got back home, his children were missing. Taking advantage of Perry's absence, Janet's parents took the children to the U.S. and sought permanent custody once they were home. This led to a direct confrontation and sparked another legal battle for custody. Ultimately, Perry regained custody, and Janet's parents were reprimanded for unlawfully taking the children. Later, the Tennessee Court of Appeals overturned Perry's manslaughter conviction. At this point, Perry believed he could lead a stable life in Mexico with his new wife and children, feeling confident that nothing would disrupt his plans. However, unexpected developments were on the horizon, as the local police department, along with 2 investigators, continued to actively investigate Janet's case. In the latter half of 2004, the prosecutor's office introduced new evidence that led to a retrial, during which 59 witnesses were heard. This resulted in charges against Perry for second-degree murder, tampering with evidence, and abuse of a corpse. In October 2005, an arrest warrant and a request for extradition to the United States were issued for Perry. While being transported, Perry was accompanied by Pat Postiglione, one of the detectives involved in the investigation. During the journey, Perry was quite talkative and asked the detective whether he could face murder charges if an accident occurred. He also told Pat that he would be willing to confess everything if he could receive a sentence of no more than 7 years. The detective stated that he would pass this information on to the district attorney. Janet's parents were determined not to allow Perry to enjoy a new life after spending a short time in prison. They submitted a new petition for custody of the children, which the judge approved. Facing difficulties in the legal system, Perry sought another solution. He attempted to persuade his cellmate, Russell Ferris, to kill Janet's parents. Russell became interested in the plan and learned that Perry's father, Arthur, would act as the intermediary. After 2 months of discussions among the three, Russell's lawyer notified the police about Perry's offer to kill Janet's parents. From that point on, Perry's situation became increasingly complicated. Initially, the evidence against Perry for murder was weak and mostly circumstantial. His lawyer argued that there was no solid proof that Perry had committed the crime. If he had been found not guilty, he could not be tried again for the same offense. However, the situation changed dramatically with the discovery of a murder-for-hire plot involving Janet's parents. Now, the police had recorded conversations revealing details of the planned murder, including statements made by both Perry and his father, Arthur. When Arthur listened to the recordings, he realized his errors and agreed to testify against his son in exchange for a more lenient sentence. The disturbing truth emerged. Arthur, Perry's father, revealed that his son had confessed to him about killing Janet. A few weeks after the murder, Perry sought his father's help because he was anxious about the body being discovered. He asked Arthur to help hide it. One night, they drove to a location where, according to Arthur, the body was already decomposing and stored in a bag. Arthur recounted loading the remains into Perry's Jeep. They then traveled north to Bowling Green, Kentucky, where they stayed at a motel. Under the cover of darkness, Arthur attempted to dispose of the body. He looked for a body of water deep enough to conceal the remains but was unable to find one before sunrise. Eventually, he located a suitable spot. Arthur later attempted to guide investigators to the location where he had hidden the body, but he couldn't specify the exact spot. However, both the police and the jury believed his account of the incident. According to Arthur, after Perry killed Janet, her body remained in their home for some time, wrapped in a rug. Unfortunately for Arthur, his confession did not yield the leniency he had hoped for, and he died just months later while incarcerated. Perry faced a much harsher fate. He was convicted of second-degree murder, tampering with evidence, abuse of a corpse, theft, and conspiracy to commit murder, resulting in a 56-year prison sentence. He is currently incarcerated at the Morgan County Correctional Complex, where he assists fellow inmates with their legal appeals in the prison law library. He will be eligible for parole in 2038. Tragically, Janet's remains have never been found. It was a regular afternoon at Danvers's high school. Most students had already left, and the hallways were quiet. But inside a second-floor bathroom, something terrible was happening. A well-loved teacher had just finished her last class of the day. She had no idea that one of her students was watching her. Minutes later, security cameras caught something strange, him walking out with his hood up and hands covered in blood. He moved through the school as if nothing had happened, casually talking to classmates, grabbing his things, and disappearing into the night. No one knew the dark secret he had just left behind, not yet. Philip Chisholm was born on January 21, 1999, in Tennessee. From a young age, he showed a keen interest in sports, and by the time he entered high school, he had already made a name for himself as a talented soccer player. His skills on the field were undeniable. In 2012, his teammates credited him as the driving force behind their championship win in the league. To those around him, Philip seemed like a friendly yet reserved young man. No one suspected that beneath his quiet demeanor, he was battling deep personal struggles. Philip's home life was far from stable. His father, a former military officer, had succumbed to alcoholism and frequently subjected him to both physical and emotional abuse. Heated arguments with his wife, Diana Chisholm, were a regular occurrence. By the fall of 2013, the tension had reached a breaking point. They decided to separate. Philip was uprooted from the life he knew and moved with his mother to a small town in Massachusetts, while his father relocated to Florida. As part of their divorce agreement, his father was permitted only limited visitation with Philip. Practically overnight, his world had changed completely. Adjusting to a new environment proved difficult for Philip. Already introverted, he struggled to find his place at his new school. Socializing didn't come easily to him, but over time, he began to open up. He gradually integrated into school life, even trying out for the basketball team. Though he made friends, he was selective about whom he spent time with, limiting his conversations in class to only a few people he deemed trustworthy. He stayed away from alcohol and banned substance, never drawing much attention to himself. However, beneath the surface, trouble was brewing. Philip found academics particularly challenging. Rather than engaging with his lessons, he often retreated into his own world, sketching in his notebook and listening to music instead of paying attention in class. It was during this time that Colleen Ritzer, one of the most beloved teachers at the school, noticed this new student. Known for her ability to connect with students, Colleen had dreamed of becoming a teacher from a young age. Excelling in mathematics, she pursued it as her career, earning her degree in mathematics with a specialization in secondary education, and began teaching 8th grade math that same year. Her dedication to her students was unmistakable. She frequently stayed after school to offer extra help and used social media to engage with them. When Philip arrived at the school, Colleen quickly noticed his academic struggles. Understanding that he was going through a rough time, she saw potential in him and believed he just needed some guidance to get back on track. However, unlike most of his classmates, Philip showed no interest in her efforts. On the morning of October 22, 2013, Philip arrived at Danvers's high school carrying multiple bags. Inside them were gloves, a change of clothes, a mask, and a box cutter, items that had nothing to do with schoolwork. Later that day, he attended Colleen's class. When the lesson was over, she approached him, offering to stay after class to help him prepare for an upcoming test. Philip's reaction was anything but appreciative. Instead, he erupted into an angry outburst. Colleen attempted to calm him down, but he stormed off. At around 3 p.m., Colleen went to the bathroom, unaware that Philip was closely following her. By that time, most students had left the school. Philip quietly entered the bathroom wearing gloves and holding a box cutter. Suddenly, he attacked Colleen, covering her mouth with a cloth to silence her. He overpowered her and stabbed her at least 16 times. The assault was interrupted when another student entered the bathroom. She saw Philip but assumed he was just changing for soccer practice, not realizing the violence happening nearby. She left without raising an alarm, unknowingly encountering a murderer. Then, Philip left the bathroom with his hood up and one hand covered in blood. He headed toward the school parking lot with a sinister plan to find a dumpster to dispose of the body. On his way, he casually greeted several friends, who had no idea about the horrific crime he had just committed. Soon after, he changed out of his clothes, putting on a white t-shirt and a red hoodie. With a recycling bin in hand, he returned to the bathroom. This time, he came out, made his way to the elevator and hiding his teacher's lifeless body. After leaving the school, Philip took the recycling bin to a secluded wooded area. There, he disguised Colleen's body with a tree branch and covered her remains with dry leaves. He also left a vague note that said, "I hate everyone." Acting normally, he returned to the school. Although his messy appearance should have raised concern, no one noticed anything unusual, allowing him to collect his belongings from his locker and leave without any interruptions. Philip thought he had gotten away with the perfect crime, but he was very wrong. Hours later, his mother started to worry when she realized he was missing. She went to the nearest police station to file a missing person report. At the same time, his soccer teammates noticed he wasn't at practice and began to search for him, becoming increasingly anxious. The police responded quickly and asked Philip's phone provider to track his last known location. The signal was traced to the area near Hollywood Hits Theater. Investigators went there and found that he had bought a movie ticket before disappearing. Shortly after that, his phone went offline at 9 p.m. The principal of Danvers High School emailed staff about Philip's disappearance. Shortly after, a math teacher called her with worrying news. Colleen Ritzer's parents also reported that she did not return home. This was particularly concerning because Philip had been in Colleen's last class that day, raising fears that they may have been together before they both disappeared. Colleen's parents were desperately trying to contact her, but their calls went unanswered. By around 11 p.m., they formally reported her missing. Police tracked Colleen's phone to the school area, noting the coincidence of two missing persons from the same school. This led them to investigate further. Their investigation took a troubling turn when they found Colleen's car still parked at the school, indicating something was wrong. While searching the building, they examined the second-floor bathroom and encountered a horrifying scene. Bloodstains covered the area, and Colleen's purse was left behind. A blood-spattered recycling bin was also found in the corner. Following this grim evidence, officers searched the woods behind the school and discovered blood-soaked clothing that belonged to Colleen. This evidence confirmed that a serious crime had occurred. Authorities quickly began questioning students and staff in hopes of finding witnesses. A student came forward to share an unsettling incident he had overheard between Philip and Colleen while he was organizing his locker. He noticed Philip was raising his voice at Colleen, who was trying to calm him down. The student thought Philip's anger might have been triggered by Colleen's question about his family, which unintentionally reminded him of his parents' divorce. Even though Colleen quickly moved on to a different topic, Philip continued to seem upset and began muttering to himself. The student felt that something was wrong but never thought Philip could become violent. A female student came forward with important information. She told investigators she saw the back of a person who appeared to be changing clothes. The person's rear end was exposed, with clothes piled on the floor in the bathroom that afternoon. Additionally, a mother who was picking up her child around 3:30 p.m. reported seeing Philip quickly leaving the school. This evidence suggested that something had occurred between Philip and Colleen. Detectives then reviewed the school's surveillance footage to understand the timeline of events leading up to their disappearances. The footage revealed alarming details. At 7:45 a.m., Philip arrived at school carrying several bags, which he stored in his locker. Then, at 2:54 p.m., Colleen was seen leaving a classroom and heading towards the second-floor bathroom. Just a minute later, Philip appeared in the hallway, watching her closely before briefly returning to the classroom. Moments after that, he came back into view with his hood up and followed her into the bathroom while putting on gloves. At 3:06 p.m., a female student was seen entering the bathroom and quickly exiting moments later. At 3:07 p.m., Philip left the bathroom with his hood up and walked to the parking lot. He returned 2 minutes later, now wearing a white t-shirt. After a few minutes, he was spotted again, this time in a red hoodie. At 3:16 p.m., he went back into the bathroom with a recycling bin. By 3:22 p.m., security footage showed him wearing a ski mask as he pushed the bin into the elevator. Shortly after, he was seen dragging it outside toward the student parking lot. Later that evening, Philip returned to the school, entered the bathroom again, and changed clothes. This time, he was barefoot, wearing a black hoodie. When investigators finished reviewing the footage, they were certain of one thing: Colleen had entered the bathroom but did not come out. In contrast, Philip had repeatedly entered and exited, changing his clothes each time and pushing a large bin on one occasion. Coupled with the blood evidence found in the bathroom, the conclusion was clear: Colleen had been murdered, and Philip was their main suspect. Law enforcement quickly began searching for Philip, who was still missing. They checked security footage from the school and nearby streets to see if they could find any signs of his movements. Simultaneously, they monitored Colleen Ritzer's bank account since Philip had stolen her wallet along with her credit cards, indicating he might have already used them. Their suspicions were confirmed when they found that Colleen's card had been used to buy a burger, fries, and a drink. A movie ticket was also purchased, and location data from Philip's phone showed he was at the theater shortly after the crime occurred. While police worked to find him, an unexpected turn of events happened. Around 2:30 a.m. on October 23rd, an officer in a nearby town saw a young man walking along the highway at the intersection of Route 1, North and Salem Road. It was Philip, aimlessly wandering without a clear direction. The officer recognized him from the missing person alert and stopped to ask questions. During a search, the officer found Colleen Ritzer's credit card and driver's license in Philip's possession. Additionally, his pants still had blood stains on them. He was promptly taken into custody and brought to the local police station. When officers searched Philip's backpack, they discovered Colleen's purse, her underwear, and a box cutter with dried blood on it. Alarmingly, there were also traces of semen and blood on Philip's own underwear. When interrogated about the blood, Philip coldly remarked, "It's from the girl," referring to Colleen, his teacher. He showed no remorse and proceeded to inform the police that her body was buried in the woods. At 3 a.m., a team of officers went to the wooded area behind Danvers High School. After searching for some time, they noticed a pile of leaves and debris. One officer spotted a thumb with pink nail polish sticking out from the leaves. When they removed the foliage, they were met with a horrifying scene. Colleen's lifeless body was lying on her back, her throat cut, and a tree branch had violated her remains. Her face and body showed signs of severe trauma. Nearby, officers found a pair of blood-soaked white gloves and a handwritten note that stated, "I hate everyone." Colleen's remains were quickly taken for forensic examination. The autopsy revealed she had suffered 16 stab wounds and had been assaulted twice. Philip was immediately charged with aggravated assault, armed robbery, and first-degree murder. He was held without bail. That morning, on October 23rd, police visited Philip's mother at her new apartment, which she had moved into after leaving Tennessee due to her divorce. She appeared very upset and acknowledged that the separation had been hard for both her and Philip. Later, through his attorney, she released a statement offering her condolences to Colleen's family. In contrast, Philip's uncle took a different view. He suggested that something must have triggered his nephew's actions, arguing that teenagers can be quick to anger, and noted that Philip was only 14 years old. He characterized Philip as a well-behaved child from a good family, seemingly minimizing the seriousness of the situation. Philip's former soccer coach shared similar feelings, saying he wanted to learn the full story before judging the teenager. Meanwhile, a student, Rania Ridui, found it hard to comprehend the tragedy. She couldn't understand why anyone would hurt Colleen, who she described as kind and caring. Colleen's family was heartbroken and in deep mourning. On October 28, 2013, the community came together to pay their respects at her funeral at St. Augustine Church. The service was very emotional and attended by nearly 1,000 people, including 400 of Colleen's students from Danvers High School, many of whom wore pink, her favorite color. The entrance to the church was decorated with pink flowers, symbolizing the love and admiration she inspired in those who knew her. Colleen's cousin spoke passionately about the large turnout at Colleen's funeral, which highlighted the significant impact she had on her community. She noted that even though Colleen had a brief life, she made a lasting impression on education, inspiring many students with her dedication and love for teaching. She also emphasized Colleen's strong bond with her siblings, her commitment to being a supportive friend and mentor. With deep sorrow and respect, Colleen's cousin described Colleen as the ideal person any parent would wish for their child to become. The Reverend provided words of comfort, encouraging attendees to focus on the meaningful life Colleen led rather than the tragic way it ended. His message resonated with those grieving, reminding them to celebrate the positivity Colleen brought to the world. Months later, at a juvenile detention center in Boston, Philip committed another crime. On June 2, 2014, he entered a staff locker room bathroom and tried to strangle a 29-year-old medical staff member and attack her with a pencil. It took several employees to restrain him while he screamed threats, including, "I'm going to kill all of you." Although he didn't succeed in killing her, she was left seriously injured. A new case was opened against him, but he was still facing charges for the murder of Colleen Ritzer before going to trial for this attack. Philip's defense attorney admitted that he had killed the teacher but argued that he should not be held criminally responsible. She claimed he was experiencing a psychotic episode and suffering from severe mental illness at the time of the murder, even stating that he had heard voices beforehand. The prosecutor strongly disagreed, asserting that Philip did not have any mental illness and presented surveillance footage as evidence. The videos showed him carefully following Colleen into the bathroom, attacking her, and then coldly placing her body into a recycling bin before wheeling it outside. The prosecutor also highlighted that after the murder, Philip casually greeted friends, ate a meal, and watched a movie while carrying evidence of his crime in his backpack. After considering the prosecution's argument, the court rejected the defense's claim of criminal insanity, ruling that Philip was mentally competent to stand trial. Since the minimum age for criminal prosecution in the United States is 14, he could be tried as an adult. On December 15, 2015, a jury found Philip guilty of first-degree murder, aggravated assault, and armed robbery. As the judge read the verdict, Philip stood silently, his hands cuffed and his expression blank. Colleen's mother, heartbroken by his lack of remorse, declared that Philip was truly evil and beyond rehabilitation. "Their family will never get a second chance with Colleen, and he shouldn't get one either," she said. Despite these emotional statements, Philip showed no reaction. He did not flinch or show any empathy or regret for the life he had taken or the family he had devastated. On February 26, 2016, despite the defense team arguing that Philip was mentally ill, he was convicted of killing Colleen Ritzer and sentenced to 40 to 60 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 40 years, a sentence that Colleen's family felt was not harsh enough. However, this was not his last sentencing. On April 26, 2024, a decade later, he faced trial again for attempting to murder a medical worker at the Boston Juvenile Facility. The atmosphere in the courtroom was tense as his attorney declared that Philip wanted to take full responsibility and resolve the case quickly. Despite this, it was evident to everyone that he lacked genuine remorse. The medical worker he attacked described him as a monster and a remorseless killer. She recounted the terrifying incident, stating that he intended to kill her. During her testimony, she revealed that his face still haunted her as a constant reminder of the trauma he caused. She pleaded with the court to keep Philip in prison for life, so no one else would suffer at his hands. Ultimately, the judge sentenced Philip to an additional 17 to 20 years for the attack, to be served concurrently with his original sentence for Colleen's murder. To this day, Philip remains in prison, serving time for the crimes he committed against two women who only tried to help him, but were met with unimaginable violence instead. Colleen's family chose to celebrate her memory instead of focusing on their sorrow after her tragic death. 1 year following her murder, they created a scholarship in her honor. In a public statement, they remembered Colleen as a kind and caring young woman whose love for teaching defined her life. They take comfort in knowing that her legacy lives on. Many students who have received the scholarship are pursuing teaching careers, inspired by Colleen's dedication and passion for education. Although she is no longer, her influence remains strong in the classrooms and hearts of those who knew her. In October 2024, Chisholm's attorneys appealed to the Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court, arguing that brain scan evidence of mental illness had been wrongly excluded. On February 25, 2025, the SJC denied a new trial, upholding Chisholm's conviction and 40-year parole. Ritzer's family expressed relief, stating the ruling allowed them to grieve without appeal uncertainties. The brutal murder of Colleen Ritzer at Danvers High School left an indelible scar on her family, students, and community, shattering the illusion of safety in a place meant for learning. Yet, from this tragedy, Colleen's radiant legacy endures through the scholarship bearing her name, inspiring future educators to carry forward her passion and kindness. Philip Chisholm, whose cold indifference and violent acts stole a beloved teacher's life, remains behind bars, his 2025 appeal denial ensuring accountability for his crimes. As Danvers continues to heal, the memory of Colleen, her infectious smile, unwavering dedication, and boundless compassion, lives on, a beacon of light that no darkness can extinguish. In a seemingly quiet house, fear permeated the air. A family was trapped in a room, holding their breath and hoping that the locked door would protect them. Suddenly, a gunshot rang out. The lock broke, someone collapsed, and footsteps echoed in the hallway. This was not just a random burglary, it was a premeditated act. When the police arrived in the morning, they discovered a perplexing crime scene. A family of 4 and their 3 dogs were found shot dead in their home. It appeared to be a robbery, yet nothing had been taken. All clues pointed toward one individual, but the real question remained: who was truly in control? As detectives looked for answers, they realized the situation involved far more than just love, jealousy, or revenge. Someone had orchestrated everything. When the truth finally emerged, it was more shocking than anyone could have anticipated. Nathaniel Huey Jr. was born around 1993 in an environment where crime and violence were common. As a child, he displayed a reckless, rebellious attitude. He had little interest in school, often fighting with classmates and neglecting his studies. His first run-in with the law occurred during his teenage years when he was caught participating in a robbery. Due to his age, he faced minimal consequences. Nathaniel soon discovered that a life of crime offered not only excitement but also financial rewards. His criminal activities escalated, and by 2016, he was imprisoned for assault. A year later, he was arrested again for driving under the influence. Nathaniel had a particular fascination with firearms. He built a collection of guns. Although the courts prohibited him from owning firearms, he disregarded this ban, turned to the black market to acquire weapons illegally. Despite his criminal history, Nathaniel attempted to pose as a legitimate businessman by starting a private security company, even though it was not properly licensed. Legally, he was not allowed to carry a weapon, yet he boasted about his supposed authority on social media, posting pictures of himself in tactical gear and heavily armed. On the other side of the story is Ermelinda Palomo, born on 1973. By the time she met Nathaniel, she was a fiercely independent woman, a mother of 5, and already a grandmother. Although she had a stable upbringing, her personal life was marked by challenges. She had married young, but the marriage ended, leaving her to raise her children on her own. Determined to support them, she held multiple jobs while managing her responsibilities as both a mother and grandmother. She was strict with her family, which earned her respect but sometimes led to resentment. When she met Nathaniel, those around her found it hard to understand their connection. He was 20 years younger, had a tumultuous past, and represented the chaos she had always tried to avoid. Some say they met through mutual friends, but regardless of the circumstances, their relationship moved quickly. Initially, Ermelinda brushed Nathaniel off, but his confidence, persistence, and reckless charm drew her in. For Nathaniel, Ermelinda represented stability and a sense of security he had never experienced. For her, it was a new adventure, an opportunity to feel in control over someone with a free lifestyle. Their relationship was unconventional, with an attraction rooted in their differences. Soon, they moved in together, sharing a crowded home with Ermelinda's children and grandchildren, but their living situation was anything but harmonious. Nathaniel's obsession with weapons remained strong over the years. Despite legal restrictions, he continued to buy and show off firearms, making secret deals and finding loopholes to justify his actions. For him, guns were not just a collection, they were a part of who he was. He always carried a weapon, even inside the house, frequently took apart and cleaned his firearms on the kitchen table. At first, Ermelinda paid little attention to this behavior. She was more focused on the money he made than the legality of his actions. However, as time passed, she began to realize that Nathaniel's interests went beyond financial gain. He was unpredictable and could become angry over minor issues, such as a misplaced word or an unfriendly glance. His temper could shift from intense rage to unnerving calm in an instant. Cristiana Espinoza, one of Ermelinda's daughters, was the first to express concern. Unlike others who ignored the warning signs, she recognized Nathaniel for who he really was, a dangerous man. She noticed how he talked about violence, carried himself with arrogance, and never tolerated being contradicted. But what scared her the most was how quickly he could lose control. By 2021, Nathaniel and Ermelinda had been living together for 6 years. On the surface, their relationship appeared stable, but its foundation had deteriorated long ago. Nathaniel had always been unfaithful, and his affairs had become routine. He used social media to meet new women, engaged in secretive conversations, and carefully deleted his messages. Often, he would leave late at night, providing vague excuses about work or meetings. Ermelinda would wake up in the middle of the night to find him gone. He would return by dawn without any explanation. Nathaniel never feared being caught. He thought Ermelinda either wouldn't discover his infidelities or wouldn't confront him if she did. He mistakenly believed he had all the control, not recognizing Ermelinda's true strength. At first, Ermelinda chose to overlook the warning signs, but soon the evidence became too clear to ignore. His late nights, secretive messages, and newfound obsession with his appearance all indicated something troubling. Her fears were confirmed when she saw a suspicious message pop up on his phone, leaving no room for doubt. Rather than confronting him right away, Ermelinda decided to gather evidence. If Nathaniel thought he was safe from consequences, he was about to find out otherwise. She began monitoring him closely, observing his movements, noting his habits, and even checking his messages when he wasn't paying attention. Before long, she could tell when he was lying, when he was trying to cover his tracks, and when he was sneaking off for yet another secret meeting. With each new revelation, her anger grew stronger. She realized she had two options: to leave him behind and erase him from her life, or to make him regret every decision that led to this moment. The more she considered it, the clearer her resolve became. She refused to be just another woman he discarded. If she wanted to make him feel pain, she had to be strategic. Instead of erupting into an argument, she decided on a different approach. She would make him feel cornered. She planned to turn his own life against him. Ermelinda's plan began with deception. She created fake social media accounts, selecting photos and inventing identities to construct believable personas. She studied online scams to learn how to manipulate and deceive effectively. This included understanding threats, the structure of underground networks, psychological tactics. Her most powerful tool was information. She figured out how to track locations, access hidden data, and manipulate the digital landscape in ways Nathaniel would not anticipate. Then, she initiated her scheme. Her first contact with Nathaniel came through a woman who seemed genuinely interested in him. As expected, he fell for it and responded eagerly, unaware that he was entering Ermelinda's trap. Initially, their conversations appeared harmless, consisting of light flirtation. However, she began to drop hints about his life that she shouldn't have known, leading him to believe someone was monitoring him. The tipping point came when she sent him a message with his real-time location. This left Nathaniel unsettled. Ermelinda could see the change in his demeanor as he started looking over his shoulder and checking his surroundings. But her tactics were far from over. The next phase of deception brought in new individuals. Nathaniel began receiving messages from various people. Some were threatening, while others falsely claimed to offer him protection. They contacted him through different platforms and phone numbers, without any clear pattern. Some messages demanded money, while others warned him to avoid certain locations. A few suggested that he was already involved in something much larger than himself. This confusion was intentional. His behavior changed almost overnight. He became restless and anxious, avoided answering unknown calls, constantly checked his surroundings, and even asked Ermelinda to drive him around to ensure he wasn't being followed. He changed his passwords and deleted messages, trying to rid himself of the unseen threat. However, the more he attempted to escape, the more entangled he became in Ermelinda's scheme. She observed with satisfaction as paranoia consumed him. Unbeknownst to him, the real danger was lurking right under his roof. In May 2023, a new woman entered Nathaniel's life, Zoraida Bartolome, one of his co-workers. Zoraida was already entangled in her own complicated situation. She was married with 2 children but was unhappy at home. She had cheated in the past and didn't feel guilty about it, believing that her own happiness was more important than being loyal. For Nathaniel, Zoraida represented an exciting escape from his troubled relationship with Ermelinda. Their connection began with stolen glances and quiet conversations, quickly escalating into something they both found hard to abandon. Ermelinda had been observing Nathaniel closely and noticed a shift in his behavior. At first, she assumed Zoraida was just another fleeting romance, but then she discovered messages that revealed deeper feelings. Nathaniel was telling Zoraida that he loved her and wanted a future together. She reciprocated those feelings, and they fantasized about leaving everything behind to start anew. As Ermelinda read their exchanges, she felt a mix of pain and humiliation. Despite her efforts to protect their relationship, Nathaniel was pursuing another woman. Now, she felt compelled to take drastic action against him. She escalated the psychological manipulation, introducing even more frightening figures into Nathaniel's life. He was no longer just being observed, he felt as if he was being hunted. Nathaniel had endured too much to feel fear anymore. He had survived the worst, or so he thought. Now, all that mattered to him was Zoraida. Leaving her was not an option. For the first time, he wasn't merely hiding an affair, he was fighting for it. Ermelinda noticed this change in him. If she couldn't break Nathaniel directly, she would aim to destroy Zoraida instead. Her first tactic was to undermine Zoraida's stability. Using her network of fake accounts, she contacted Zoraida's husband, Alberto Rolón. Initially, she planted vague doubts through anonymous messages that suggested betrayal. She even included photos of Zoraida and Nathaniel together, ensuring they were clear enough to raise suspicion. However, Alberto was not easily swayed. He dismissed the warnings, unwilling to accept that his wife could deceive him so openly. That's when Ermelinda intensified her approach. The subsequent messages were not just about infidelity, they included threats. Unsigned letters arrived at their home with clear implications. If Alberto did not take action, his family would be in danger. Alberto began to observe Zoraida more intently. The tension in their home was exactly as Ermelinda had intended. However, Nathaniel was still unwilling to let go. Even as paranoia invaded his life, he held on to Zoraida as if she were his last hope. Ermelinda manipulated his perceptions, convincing him that Zoraida was providing information to the people spying on him. She crafted a story so believable that even Nathaniel began to doubt his own reality. Using fake accounts, she sent messages from imaginary informants, all suggesting the same idea. Zoraida wasn't just a woman Nathaniel had fallen for, she was working against him and was the source of the ongoing threats. Nathaniel's paranoia took over him completely. He confronted Ermelinda about his suspicions, and she played along convincingly. Initially, she seemed unsure, but then she reluctantly confessed that she had also received warnings about Zoraida. Nathaniel realized he could no longer dismiss these concerns. He had to take action to ensure his survival. Next, Ermelinda put him to the ultimate test of loyalty. She made him believe that his supposed enemies were closely monitoring him and required evidence that he hadn't betrayed them. The only way he could prove his loyalty was by making a crucial decision himself: kill Zoraida. By the time Nathaniel reached his decision, he felt no hesitation. There was no fear or regret, just a cold, determined focus on what needed to be done. He started planning immediately, treating the situation like a mission. Nathaniel studied Zoraida's routines, tracked her schedule, and identified when she was most vulnerable. He noted when Alberto was home, when the children were asleep, and when it would be easiest to enter the house. He mapped out potential escape routes, looking for surveillance cameras and memorizing the neighborhood layout. Simultaneously, he prepared his supplies. He already had a stockpile of weapons but gathered additional tools, including clothing to help him blend into the night, gloves to avoid leaving fingerprints, tape, and a flashlight. Together with Ermelinda, he chose items carefully, ensuring no one would suspect anything. Although Ermelinda remained in the background and was not directly involved, she always provided guidance to keep him on track. By the time everything was ready, Nathaniel had stopped considering the consequences. The night came. Ermelinda drove towards Zoraida's house with an unsettling calmness, acting as if it were just another evening. She even asked Nathaniel why he needed to go there, though she already knew the reason. He didn't answer. He no longer cared about her opinion, only the task ahead mattered. When they arrived at the house, Ermelinda remained in the car while Nathaniel got out. As he expected, the front door was locked. He quietly moved around to the side of the house, found a window, and broke the glass. The sound startled Alberto awake. He sat up, listened intently, and then cautiously approached the noise. By that time, Nathaniel was already inside. As soon as Alberto rounded the corner, Nathaniel fired his gun, but his shot went wide. Realizing this was more than just a break-in, Alberto turned and ran toward the hallway, desperate to reach his family's room before the intruder. However, Nathaniel was quicker. Gunshots rang out through the house. Alberto fell to the ground before he could reach the door. For a brief moment, there was silence. Then the next gunshot broke the stillness, sending Zoraida into a panic. Without thinking, she rushed to the bedroom, pulling her children along, and slammed the door shut, locking it behind her. She knew Nathaniel was inside and was unsure how many others he was with, but her priority was to keep her family safe. Moments later, Nathaniel slammed his shoulder against the door, trying to force it open, but it held strong. Frustrated, He stepped back, aimed his gun, and shot at the lock. The bullet pierced through the wood. Zoraida gasped as the impact hit her. She stiffened and then collapsed. The doors swung open, the children huddled together, their eyes filled with fear. The neighbors only heard a few brief, muffled gunshots. It all happened within minutes. Nathaniel looked around at the scene, took a deep breath to calm himself, and then began to methodically rearrange things. He flipped over furniture, opened drawers, and scattered valuable items on the floor to make it appear as though a robbery had taken place. Once he finished, he stepped over the bodies and exited into the night. Ermelinda was waiting for him in the car. She didn't need to ask how it went, her expression said it all. They drove away silently, leaving the chaos behind. The sounds had awakened the neighborhood, and after a few minutes, someone finally summoned the courage to call 911. Soon after, sirens filled the street. Officers arrived to find shattered glass, a broken door, and clear signs of a break-in. Inside, the bodies revealed a much darker story than just a failed robbery. Nathaniel had made serious mistakes, careless ones. Nothing of value had been stolen. The disarray of his possessions seemed like a feeble attempt to mislead. It was evident that this incident wasn't simply about theft, it was premeditated and targeted. By morning, detectives were connecting the crime to Nathaniel Huey, the only person with a motive. At Zoraida's workplace, everyone knew about their affair. It hadn't been a secret. As detectives continued to investigate, things looked increasingly bad for Nathaniel. His history was filled with crimes, assaults, suspicious dealings, and a collection of weapons. As the police gathered evidence, Ermelinda maintained her facade. She kept messaging Nathaniel, using the false identity she had created. She assured him that everything was under control, claiming the mafia was protecting him and that as long as he followed their instructions, he'd be safe. He trusted her, but the investigation was progressing more quickly than Ermelinda anticipated. They scrutinized Nathaniel's recent activities, analyzing every call, email, and text message. One thing stood out: in recent months, he had received a flood of anonymous threats, warnings of danger, and claims that he was being hunted. However, all those messages had originated from newly created accounts. If this were truly a mafia operation, why was the evidence focusing solely on Nathaniel? The more the detectives uncovered, the clearer it became that the threats were staged, as if someone had been fabricating a false narrative specifically for him. This was the turning point in the investigation. Nathaniel was in a downward spiral. He sensed that the police were closing in on him and started noticing unmarked cars tailing him, along with strangers watching him too closely. He convinced himself that the mafia was still after him, waiting for him to make a mistake. In his desperation, he reached out to the only person he believed he could trust, his mother. He begged her for help, claiming he was being falsely accused of something terrible and needed to go into hiding. However, she refused to help him. With nowhere else to turn, Nathaniel managed to stay hidden for a few days, but eventually, security cameras captured him in a grocery store. A manhunt ensued, with patrol cars flooding the area, but by the time the officers arrived, Nathaniel and Ermelinda had already made it onto the highway. The chase began. Police followed with sirens blaring for miles, but Nathaniel had no plans to stop. He gripped the steering wheel tightly, accelerating and weaving through traffic in a frantic attempt to flee. Ermelinda had carefully planned every detail leading up to this moment, and now she was watching her plan unfold perfectly. Ahead of them, traffic became congested. Nathaniel attempted to navigate around a truck, but he lost his grip, causing the tire to screech against the road. The car spun out of control, crashing into the guardrail and flipping multiple times before coming to a sudden stop. Officers surrounded the wreck, weapons drawn. Nathaniel slumped in the driver's seat, a gun in his hand, while Ermelinda sat motionless beside him. In those final moments, he had turned the gun on her and then himself. Investigators sifted through the wreckage, trying to understand what had transpired inside the car. Did he realize what was happening? The investigation didn't stop there. Detectives focused on Ermelinda's devices. Hidden within her files were hundreds of messages, chat logs, and notes detailing her manipulation of Nathaniel, dozens of fake accounts that she had carefully created and controlled. She had constructed this elaborate scheme. She understood how to break a person's will and instill fear so deeply that they would do anything to escape it. And it had worked. Nathaniel had never been in danger. There was no mafia. The true enemy had been sitting right beside him all along. In the end, the case was closed, but one question lingered. Did Nathaniel understand the situation before he took action? Ermelinda's calculated plan, fueled by wounded pride and a desire for revenge, transformed Nathaniel from an unfaithful partner into a paranoid pawn who unwittingly executed her deadly scheme. The Romeoville murders, disguised as a robbery, revealed the devastating consequences of unchecked emotions and hidden motives. As the investigation uncovered Ermelinda's intricate web of lies, it left one lingering question unanswered. Did Nathaniel ever glimpse the truth behind his actions, or did he remain trapped in her illusions until the end? The will to live is not something everyone possesses. While some people remain stuck in their problems, a little girl in desperate need of help is fighting against a dangerous psychopath. But what can a child do against someone who has taken many lives? In December 1999, Crystal Searles was just 10 years old. She was known to be hardworking and humble. Despite her youth, she had already faced significant hardships. Unfortunately, what lay ahead for her was worse than anything she had ever experienced. Crystal and her brother were staying with friends of the Harris family in Del Rio, Texas, while waiting for their mother and younger sisters to move from Kansas. December 30th, 1999, seemed like a normal day filled with preparations for the new year. But for some, the arrival of the new millennium was about to take a tragic turn. Mark was Crystal's brother, and they both grew up in Kansas. At that time, Mark was 7 years old and Crystal was 10. They spent the day with the children of the Harris family. Crystal and Mark were welcomed by the Harris family for a while. Crystal quickly adapted by helping with household chores and forming close bonds with everyone. During the New Year holidays, Crystal looked forward to reuniting with her mother and sisters. However, she and Mark struggled to get along, likely due to their age difference and varying interests. The Harris family had several children, with Sean as the eldest, followed by Justin, Lori, and Katie. Sean had already moved out but was planning to return for the holidays. That night, the Harris family planned to go into town to pick up Sean and the two older kids. The result is that Crystal, Katie, and Mark would be left alone at home without any adults around. The house was situated in a remote area, surrounded by nature, with few neighbors nearby. That night, little Mark was scared of the dark, wanted to sleep in the same room as the older girls, Crystal and Katie. However, they pushed him away because they wanted to share a secret. Upset, Mark had to go to the next room. It took him 2 hours to calm down and fall asleep. The next morning, sunlight poured into the room, waking Mark up. The curtains had been pulled back. When he opened his eyes, a strange woman was there. She handed him some clothes, urged him to get ready to leave. When Mark stepped out, he was shocked to find a large pool of blood on the floor, with stains and splatters on the walls and door. The floor was almost completely covered in it. People around him were crying and panicking, but Mark couldn't understand what was going on. He looked for his sister but couldn't find her or Katie. The adults ignored his questions about the girls. When detectives arrived at the house, they were immediately struck by the amount of blood present. In the room where the girls had spent the night, they found 13-year-old Katie lying on the floor, unresponsive. It was clear from her severe injuries that she had fought for her life but had ultimately succumbed to a fatal cut to her throat, resulting in blood loss. In contrast, Crystal was fortunate to have survived the attack by an unknown assailant, although she was in critical condition. At around 6 a.m. on December 31st, 1999, Pam Searles, Crystal's mother, received a call. They asked for her permission to perform an emergency operation because her daughter was in critical condition with a severe throat injury. Pam was in shock and struggled to understand what had happened. Crystal quickly became an important witness for the police, even as she battled for her life in a local hospital's operating room. After a successful surgery, she was placed on life support, including a ventilator, as she was unable to breathe independently. When her mother arrived at the hospital, Crystal's condition had improved. The surgeon had managed to save her life, but her trachea and vocal cords had sustained serious injuries. Despite her state, Crystal's main concern was whether her friend Katie had survived. However, Pam did not have the strength to tell her that her friend had died. As soon as Crystal woke up after the surgery, she wanted to speak to the police to tell them what had happened. According to Crystal, she and her friend had gone to bed quite late. She had no idea what time it was when she was awakened by a scream. Raising her head from the top bunk, she saw a man with disheveled hair, a thick beard, and dark, angry eyes standing in front of her. She immediately noticed that Katie was bleeding and that this stranger had a knife in his hand. He covered Katie's mouth with his hand, slowly cutting her throat. The attacker hadn't noticed Crystal at first and was about to leave, but when Katie fell to the floor and began to make death rattles, Crystal recoiled involuntarily when their eyes met. Turning around one last time, the criminal spotted Crystal on the top bunk. Terrified, she tried to climb down to escape through the open window. With a quick movement, he caught up with her and cut her throat as well. Then the stranger disappeared from the house. Despite her injury, Crystal was able to crawl. She climbed down from the top bunk with difficulty and headed for the bedroom door. On the way, she bumped into her friend, who was still making hoarse sounds, and then went quiet. Crystal lay down next to Katie, hugged her, and wanted to tell her that everything would be fine, but she couldn't. In that moment, she realized that she was mute. The criminal had severed her vocal cords. She was unable to utter a single word clearly. Suddenly, Crystal realized that she needed to ask for help. The phone was useless in her case, so she wrote a note asking for help and decided to get to the neighbors. With her throat cut, Crystal crawled out onto the terrace of the house, dressed in her pajamas and without shoes, but she saw a light in the distance, realized that it was her goal. Crystal stood up with difficulty and walked slowly toward the light. When she reached the neighboring house, which was a good distance away, she began to pound on the door. Then she heard a man's voice asking who was there. Unable to speak, she continued to knock as hard as she could until he opened the door. The neighbors saw the bloody girl, read the note, and called the police. Crystal's brother was unharmed because he had been in another room where the attacker had not entered. Based on the words of Crystal, a composite sketch was created. A check of the police database revealed several potential suspects with various convictions. The next day, the police returned to Crystal and presented several photographs for identification. Crystal confidently pointed to the image of Tommy Lynn Sells, who immediately became the prime suspect. At that time, he was in Del Rio, having arrived relatively recently. Up until that point, he had committed only minor offenses, but Crystal recognized that empty, cruel look instantly. The detectives decided to investigate him. When Tommy's door was knocked on early in the morning, he was informed that he was under arrest for murder. He came out to meet the police and immediately stated that he was glad he was finally caught because he was tired of committing these acts. Initially, the police did not grasp the alarming significance of Tommy's words. He told them about the murder weapon, which turned out to be a 30-centimeter butcher knife. He had used it often over the years, and the blade had been sharpened regularly. It had simply broken. The man had thrown the knife in the bushes near his home, where it was found with traces of blood. Tommy was taken to the county sheriff's office. From the beginning, he willingly cooperated with the authorities, confessed without hesitation to the murder of Katie and the attempted murder of Crystal. He was surprised when he learned about the surviving girl. Tommy agreed to reconstruct the events in the house where he had killed Katie. His behavior seemed odd considering the terrible crimes being discussed. At the same time, he was clearly sealing his own fate by cooperating with the authorities. Tommy began to recount the details of the night of the crime. He explained that as soon as he approached the house, he noticed the open window, which made it easier for him to enter. He walked down the hallway, saw different children sleeping in various rooms, and then chose one with a bunk bed. He entered quietly, approached the lower bunk. Tommy began stabbing and cut Katie's throat. Before leaving, he noticed the second girl and also cut her throat. The detectives managed to find out he had been friends with the Harris family for a long time. It was suspected that, based on this relationship, he had planned the attack on Katie in advance, likely intending to abuse her. Tommy did indeed abuse Katie first, then killed her because he was thirsty for blood. Before arriving at the Harris house, he had intended to break into a trailer where 6 people lived. He knew them and wanted to kill them all, but he feared they might fight back, so he changed his mind at the last moment, sought easier prey. He had heard that the Harris family was hosting a couple of children and that they might be alone that night. Crystal's mother felt guilty for not being there for her daughter during such a terrible time in her life, but she had been forced to settle various issues before moving. To better understand what had happened, she expressed a desire to visit the crime scene. Upon arriving, she witnessed a scene that resembled a horror movie, with an entire floor covered in blood. Crystal had run for help with her last strength, leaving bloody handprints on the wall. Immediately after his arrest, Tommy behaved quite calmly. He was being transported to prison when he shocked the law enforcement officers by suggesting that they probably wanted to know about all the other murders he had committed. This surprised all the police officers, especially since they hadn't even asked him about other possible crimes before. Detectives usually avoid allowing journalists to be present during interrogations, as this could lead to important information being widely publicized and having unpredictable consequences. However, this time, the situation was serious. There were numerous murders involved. Ultimately, the decision was made to allow the media to participate in the interviews, which would quickly spread Tommy's story across the country, potentially help find people who had also survived his attacks and could identify their assailant. A reliable journalist, trusted by the police, was chosen for this purpose and was able to convey Tommy's story clearly, without distortion. The journalist sat in the interrogation room for hours, listening to Tommy recount stories of his life, describing his journeys from state to state while killing men, women, and children without remorse. He was a cold-blooded madman, recounting real bloody scenes as if they were made-up campfire horror stories. Among the most vivid childhood memories that Tommy shared was his father's phrase, "Dead men don't talk." From the start, he doubted that any of his victims could have survived the attack. In his opinion, Crystal was very lucky, but it was unlikely that anyone else had been so fortunate. Even at this stage, the extent of his madness was unclear. Over the next 9 months, he communicated regularly with detectives in the presence of a journalist. In total, he described 22 murders that he committed with his own hands. There were other unconfirmed incidents that could not be verified. Clearly, many more crimes had been committed. This man's words were corroborated by his knife, which he had used all these years to take the lives of innocents. The blade had been sharpened so many times that it became very thin and resembled a slate. The butcher knife didn't even look like a kitchen tool, it resembled something from a torture chamber. After all these events, surgeries, discharge, talking to detectives and journalists, Crystal was gradually recovering. She was shocked by the extent of her injuries. A long scar remained on her throat after the surgery, and she cried when she saw it for the first time. Her mother took her to Kansas, away from the scene of the massacre, but they still had to return to Texas for her to testify against the serial killer. 9 months had passed since the murder and attempted murder. Tommy's stories about other crimes had ended. Crystal was 11 years old by this point. She managed to partially recover, but only physically. Psychologically, she continued to struggle with the consequences of the horrors she had witnessed, as well as the cruelty of the madman she now had to testify against in court. She was the main witness for the prosecution. From the very beginning, the situation was tense. Crystal had not seen the criminal since the night he slit her friend's throat before her eyes, almost killing her. It was hard for everyone caught up in Tommy's villainy. During the hearings in Texas, Crystal was taken in by Texas Ranger Johnny Allen, who was a family man with 2 children at the time. Crystal met their daughters, hoping that this would help distract her from her situation. According to the family, Crystal would wake up screaming in the middle of the night, thrashing around in bed as if trying to escape from someone. Everyone knew this was what her nightmares were about, but the girl was determined not to give up. Tommy's lawyer also had a difficult task ahead of him. He knew all too well that his client was a dangerous serial criminal who had taken dozens of lives for no reason. His only strategy was to try to avoid capital punishment. He was not going to deny the charges. Despite the adults' concerns, Crystal even spoke enthusiastically about the upcoming meeting with Tommy. She understood that now he would not have a chance to attack her, so she was not afraid. She simply wanted to achieve a fair punishment for this monster. Crystal comforted herself with the thought that she was the reason he was caught and that she had stopped the chain of murders at his hands. According to the prosecutor's office, if Crystal had not miraculously survived that attack and pointed out Tommy, he would have continued his bloody spree across the United States. Who knows how many more people could have died from his knife? The courageous schoolgirl thought that by doing this, she was pursuing justice and vengeance for her friend who had been killed. Up until the day of her testimony, Crystal felt very inspired. That morning, she woke up to find her mother so worried that she was in tears. She asked her mother to calm down so that she wouldn't be distracted from this important moment that could help them stop the serial killer. During the hearings, Crystal once again demonstrated her fortitude. She walked to the stand when called to testify, passing mere centimeters away from the criminal. Although she could have chosen to enter through a specially prepared secret door for such cases, she expressed a desire to walk past the assailant who had cut her throat. She stated that she was not afraid of the man. At one point, however, her determination wavered slightly. While Crystal was on the stand, Tommy displayed no panic, nervousness, or tears. He didn't even look at her while she spoke and answered questions. Crystal confirmed that it was this man who had slit her and her friends' throats, pointing at him. Conversely, he appeared to be impatiently waiting for a decision, which made Crystal increasingly nervous. Eventually, the tension overwhelmed her. She burst into tears and could no longer speak. The court took a forced 15-minute break to allow the prosecution's main witness to compose herself. After the break, Crystal returned to her previous resolve, showing the jury her scar across her throat, a mark that the defendant had left on her body for the rest of her life. Then there was a demonstration of the attack. Crystal lay on a makeshift table that was meant to represent a bed, showing how the attacker had stabbed her with a knife. This allowed the jury to comprehend the scale of the cruelty and horror that the child had endured. The girl illustrated how she had tried to cover her throat with her hands, having witnessed what Tommy had done to her friend, not wanting to share the same fate. Perhaps this instinct is what saved her from a fatal hemorrhage that could have killed her within minutes. The courage of the 11-year-old schoolgirl was acknowledged by her lawyer. Instead of cross-examining her, the defense attorney praised her and did not ask a single question. At that moment, it became clear that even a serial killer's defense attorney was on the side of the victims. No one expected the trial to be so short, especially in such a high-profile case. However, the jury returned with a verdict after about an hour of deliberation. They found the defendant guilty of first-degree murder and attempted first-degree murder. Now only one question remained: would he receive life in prison or the death penalty? The final stage of the trial was set. No one suspected that the brave little girl sitting in front of everyone actually harbored other secrets. Mark Searles, Crystal's father, believed he understood why his daughter had such a strong, determined character, which enabled her to confront this monster. He was convinced that she simply knew what to do. According to Mark, he and Pam began using illegal substances 5 years before these tragic events. He claimed that the addiction quickly took over subjecting them to a tumultuous cycle of attempting to recover and then falling back into addiction. They began to quarrel more frequently, and things spiraled out of control. Mark got into serious legal trouble, which only worsened over time. Meanwhile, Pam desperately sought to restore her normal life, distance herself from anything related to illegal activities. Ultimately, she filed for divorce, focused on overcoming her addiction. Pam got herself together and concentrated on her children. However, years earlier, Crystal had assumed the role of caretaker, as she was the eldest girl in the family. She recalled a time when her parents were dependent, how her father could sleep all day without regaining consciousness. As a result, she was forced to care for her younger siblings. Naturally, she also attended school. Despite her young age, the schoolgirl began to grasp the harsh realities of life. She became a reliable support for her mother, changed her sister's diapers, fed them, put them to bed, prepared for school in the mornings, and even cooked her own meals. By her own admission, Crystal felt like the unluckiest girl in her class, as others did not face such struggles. Crystal was never driven to or picked up from school, nor did she receive help. Of course, this situation seemed unjust. On the other hand, would she have been able to ask for help if not for the independence forced upon her in her early years? According to her sisters, during that time, Crystal took on the responsibilities of both her mother and father, with many not even knowing what her parents looked like because she shouldered almost all of the family responsibilities. Crystal remembered the moment her mother, Pam, decided to end it all. Pam managed to quit and gradually return to a normal life. However, from her recollections, her father remained entrenched in criminal circles. He could not quit, and many believed he didn't even try. By Mark's own admission, he couldn't stop using and selling banned substance, finding himself drawn into criminal schemes, fearing that leaving that lifestyle would be a dangerous decision. After Pam and the children moved out, Mark was arrested a few months later. Pam felt relieved to have left him, as staying with him might have jeopardized her dreams of a new life. He ended up in jail because of his criminal connections. His daughters was so angry with him that she simply stopped answering his calls, blaming him for choosing illegal substances over family. Mark he learned about the attack on his daughter. At that moment, he was behind bars and could not help her in any way. At the time of the attack, Mark was serving a sentence for the sale and possession of illegal substances. He was in prison for about 3 months. Suddenly, at 10 a.m., an unexpected visit occurred, as it was outside the permitted visiting hours. The matter was urgent. His mother and sister came to inform him about what had happened to Crystal. Emotions ran high. If he had not been incarcerated, he would have torn Tommy apart with his own hands. Naturally, this didn't change much. Mark couldn't change anything, not even be present in court to support his daughter. But at that moment, something shifted in him. He rethought his life, which had brought his daughter to that house on that fateful night. If it weren't for his problems, no one would have attacked Crystal. Meanwhile, there was one main issue to be resolved, determining what punishment the serial killer would receive for the murder of Katie and the attempted murder of Crystal. Pam had wanted the death penalty for the attacker from the very beginning. Crystal initially supported this decision, but gradually she concluded that she did not want to become like that creature who thirsted for blood. She advocated for a life sentence instead. However, compared to crimes, the prosecutor's office demanded the death penalty. The jury supported this initiative. In the end, Tommy was sentenced to death. The court believed that this would allow him to atone not only for Katie and Crystal but for all of his other victims. He eluded authorities for 20 years and was finally stopped thanks to a brave schoolgirl. Tommy Lynn Sells was born in Oakland, California, on June 28, 1964, one of 5 children of a single mother. He hardly knew his father. Tommy's sister fell ill and died when she was only 1.5 years old. After that, he was sent to live with his aunt, where he behaved poorly. He was returned to his mother, who did not want him. By the age of 7, Tommy had begun to drink alcohol and soon became the victim of abuse by an adult man. From the age of 10, he became addicted to banned substance and troubled his grandmother. All family members began to fear him, eventually kicked him out of the house. From the age of 14, Tommy began to wander. When he was 17, he found his mother and began to molest her in the shower. He was placed in a psychiatric clinic, where he was diagnosed with several disorders, including bipolar disorder. However, the treatment did not help. His condition worsened due to alcohol and substance abuse. According to Tommy, he committed his first murder at 15, on July 5, 1979, in Port Gibson, Mississippi, when he shot and killed 39-year-old John Kay during a home invasion. Witnesses described a suspect who resembled Tommy. The violence escalated from there. The next attack occurred on April 27, 1982, in St. Louis, Missouri, when 35-year-old Joanne Tate, 35, was abused and murdered in her home. Notably, Another man had already been convicted and was serving time for this crime, but he was later exonerated. Tommy committed several murders of single mothers with children, breaking into their homes at night, kidnapping the children from their homes, abusing, and killing them in various ways. The style of each crime was different, so detectives did not see a connection between the attacks. The criminal did not spare anyone, even small children. Sometimes he would meet a future victim, gain her trust, enter her house, then kill her and her children. Tommy's most horrific murder was the attack on the Dardine family, where he killed 4 people at once. On November 17, 1987, while hitchhiking, he was picked up by 29-year-old Keith Dardine, who kindly brought him home for dinner. But instead of gratitude, Tommy shot Keith and then beat his 3-year-old son to death. He then proceeded to assault the pregnant wife of the homeowner, who gave birth to a baby girl during the attack. He killed both the wife and the newborn. Tommy's last known crime was the attack on Kathy and Crystal. For some of the 22 established murders, he received life sentences in various states. For others, he was never convicted, believing that the death penalty would suffice. Despite the fact that Crystal had defeated a serial killer, she had mixed feelings. She did not feel joy at the upcoming execution of Tommy, as she had never been the kind of person who indulged in such things, no matter who the perpetrator was. However, she did not challenge the verdict. Now, Crystal faced a much harder and longer struggle. Her parents were confident that she would cope with the consequences of the attack. Her mother and sisters rallied around her, even sleeping together in the same bed to provide support. Unfortunately, this did not always allow Crystal to rest fully. At times, she could spend an entire night without blinking, staring at the closed window of her room. By her own admission, during such moments, she thought about her escape routes in case of an attack. If the criminal entered through that window, she knew to run out through the other one. And if he entered through the door, she also knew how to hide quickly. In addition, it was important for Crystal to know that her loved ones were nearby. The girl felt reassured simply by the fact that her mother and sisters were alive and breathing. She could sense it. Gradually, Crystal began to regain her sense of self. Her father, Mark, spent 3 years behind bars. When he was released, he immediately sought to improve his relationship with his daughter, who had miraculously survived the attack of a serial killer. He understood that she needed support and help. She saw her father on the right path, even attending her graduation. However, Crystal felt that the relationship with her father was still a struggle. Their relationship continued to improve gradually, and both looked at it positively. Crystal was in a mentally difficult situation. It was not easy for her to feel joy despite an unconditional victory while her friend had died. Gradually, she returned to her usual life and became like a mother to the younger members of the family. Later, she spoke repeatedly with journalists, sharing that she cannot psychologically develop trust in people. Because of this, she has difficulties with relationships, although she genuinely wants to build a family. Nevertheless, Crystal still believes in the best. She even saw her father cope, quit crime and addiction, gradually make up for lost time. She is now 35 years old. Crystal is close to her family and constantly remembers her friend who was killed before her eyes. The events of that terrible night remain etched in her memory. Little is known about her personal life at the moment. On January 3, 2014, a judge set Tommy's execution date. The death sentence by lethal injection was carried out on April 3, 2014, at the Texas State Penitentiary in Huntsville. Crystal and members of the Harris family were present at the execution. Kitzbühel is a small Austrian town located, with a population of just over 8,000 people. Despite its size, more than 20,000 tourists visit every winter, drawn by the local mountain slopes. For many decades, this place has been known as a winter resort for the wealthy. Additionally, there are numerous celebrations that attract athletes and fans from around the world. Since October 2018, the ski slopes have been prepared before the winter season. The hotels and tourism companies have been making the final preparations to welcome numerous guests. However, the joyful events were overshadowed by the horrific murders. Nadine Hinterholzer was born in Austria, grew up in a close-knit family. From an early age, she was energetic, cheerful, and quite pretty. She had a large circle of friends who loved her for her straightforwardness, good sense of humor, and pleasant demeanor. Nadine lived with her parents and older brother in a spacious house in Kitzbühel. At the age of 14, significant changes began in her life when she met a guy named Andreas E., who was 20 at the time. He already looked like an adult, while she was still a teenager. A 6-year age difference at that age can seem significant. Despite this, they felt a mutual attraction. After several dates, they began a romantic relationship in secret from Nadine's relatives. Eventually, they both realized that age could pose the greatest obstacle in their relationship. Nadine was concerned that her older boyfriend could face legal issues because of his involvement with a minor, but they were reluctant to break up. At first, Nadine carefully hinted to her parents about the significant changes in her life, which raised some alarms for her mother and father. However, Andreas was determined and decided to take a bold step. He personally approached Nadine's family to seek permission for their relationship. From the beginning, he emphasized that this was not a fleeting affair. He wanted to build a future with her but did not want to rush her, allowing her to finish school and pursue her education. Andreas was familiar with her brother, Kevin. Soon after meeting, they became close friends. During home visits, Andreas's initiative was highly appreciated by Nadine's parents, especially after she described him as well-mannered, polite, and loving. Overall, the family liked Andreas, so they permitted Nadine to continue their relationship. Nadine had just entered the challenging teenage years. Her parents believed that a relationship with an older boyfriend could positively influence her, as he could take care of her and protect her from unpleasant situations. Andreas acted as though Nadine meant a lot to him, growing closer to her family. Initially, they spent all their free time together, and after 3 years, Andreas moved in with them. Nadine and Andreas posted statuses on social media indicating their engagement. While Andreas had intentions of getting married, he respected Nadine's desires to finish school and make her own life decisions before rushing into marriage. They continued dating for several years, to the point where Nadine's family began to treat Andreas like their own son. Finally, Nadine turned 18, officially becoming an adult, while Andreas was already 24. They decided it was time to move out and live independently. Nadine's grandmother significantly assisted them by offering her apartment for Nadine and Andreas to settle in. By this time, Nadine had completed her schooling. She intended to continue her studies at college. She did not plan on marriage or children, which disappointed Andreas slightly, as she wanted to establish herself first. Nadine enrolled in driving school and attended classes with her friends, who often picked her up. She aspired to become a professional dancer and build a career in this field. To their relatives, Nadine and Andreas represented the epitome of romance. Although the age difference made their relationship seem unconventional, it was evident that their bond was built on love and mutual understanding. It seemed as though their lives were just beginning, with no threats on the horizon. Andreas had faced Nadine's transitional phase early in their relationship when she was just 14, and they had managed to cope with that difficult period, maintaining, even strengthening their bond. However, after she reached adulthood, some other challenges began to emerge in their relationship. Andreas was seriously determined to pursue further development, family life, and children, but he could not achieve the same aspirations from his beloved. A 24-year-old man, he worked as a bricklayer and spent the lion's share of his time, energy on his job. Upon returning home in the evening, he just wanted to relax with his girlfriend in their apartment, but this did not meet the new needs of an 18-year-old. While she had already become an adult, she still wanted to relax, spend time with friends, and go to parties. Previously, they had constantly gone out together, but now Andreas wanted to spend time at home in front of the TV, which was too boring for Nadine. Initially, she managed to persuade him to go for walks or spend time outside their home, but over time, this became nearly impossible. Andreas began to refuse such outings, citing fatigue and stating that he had to work in the morning. He complained that he wanted to relax and recharge but felt unsupported by her. During this period, the age difference between them became particularly apparent. Nadine was at the peak of her activity and craved entertainment, while she realized that Andreas had already moved past that phase of life, who now had other interests. However, she was not willing to adjust to him or give in. She wanted to live the life of a young woman, socialize, and have fun with her friends. All of this led to conflicts beginning to arise between them. Nadine even told Andreas that if this continued, she would have to break up with him. Despite her repeatedly expressing this not only to him but also to her friends and relatives, he did not take her words seriously. He saw no reason for a breakup, insisting that he still loved her, hoped she would calm down over time and everything would return to normal. He continued planning a lavish wedding, believing it was the right time since their relationship had lasted for 5 years. He wanted to change his social media status from engaged to married, but her insistence on remaining single, along with her constant reproaches and talk of breaking up, loomed over their relationship. Andreas increasingly became intrusive and rude. Nadine felt that he simply wanted to control her completely and grew angry that he could not succeed. She even began to tell her friends that they had always had problems that she had kept silent about. In the summer of 2018, Nadine made the firm decision to break up, but she did not want any conflict. She hoped they could maintain a friendly relationship. At that time, she was 19 years old, and Andreas was already 25. According to Nadine, her boyfriend was never cruel or aggressive and did not limit her communication with others. The major issue was his passivity and jealousy. He could not stand it when she was in the company of other guys. She even lost all her male friends after meeting Andreas at the age of 14. Nadine told her friend that they had decided to separate and live apart. She was sure that her boyfriend took it calmly. She believed their relationship was officially over after 5 years together. Nadine and Andreas stopped dating. He moved out of her grandmother's apartment and returned to his parents' house. The idea of maintaining friendly relations seemed to work as they both had mutual friends and kept in touch with their families. Andreas continued to be friends with Nadine's older brother, Kevin, as if nothing had happened. They were peers and had a lot in common. However, this was the calm before the storm. During this period, doubts began to surface during their communication. Nadine increasingly suspected that Andreas was not taking the breakup calmly. Kevin thought Andreas had accepted this as another whim of his girlfriend and was simply waiting for a signal from Nadine regarding the restoration of their relationship. The friends had discussed this many times. Andreas could not accept that it was truly over. Thoughts and conversations about his ex consumed almost all of his time. Andreas's behavior approached obsession. He seized every opportunity to communicate with Nadine, asking for a second chance, trying to win her back, even continuing to talk about marriage and children. Within the first month of the breakup, it became clear that Andreas did not understand the situation and was simply in denial. He did not realize that they were no longer a couple. Each time Nadine firmly said no, insisting that everything was over between them, she labeled their relationship as her youthful mistake, even confiding this to her other friends. All of this hurt Andreas, but he continued to endure. He still hoped for a reconciliation. Some of his friends sympathized with him, but by the end of the second month after the breakup, they too began to notice that his behavior resembled stalking. He showed up everywhere Nadine went, always initiating conversation. Andreas's persistence caused Nadine to start avoiding him. She tried to gently indicate that their relationship was over, but he only became more determined. When she tried to stop their meetings, he made efforts to interact with her. Nadine's friends and family knew that she was consistently rejecting his advances, but he was spreading different stories to his own circle. Even 2 months after the breakup, he still believed that she wanted to be with him and thought she was only trying to make him pursue her. Kevin tried to tell Andreas to move on and date other girls, but he remained stubborn. As of October 5, 2018, the situation remained unchanged. Nadine and Andreas had officially been separated for 3 months. Nadine's entire family was aware of the breakup. Even his parents tried to convince him to reconsider. That evening, Andreas spent time with Kevin. They visited several bars but didn't stay long in any of them. Eventually, they ended up at one bar, where Kevin unexpectedly saw Nadine. He found it surprising to run into her, especially since, despite the town being small, there were enough bars catering to tourists that it was unlikely they would see each other regularly. Andreas appeared to either be following Nadine, receiving updates on her location, or simply searching for her as he moved between various places throughout the evening. Kevin knew that for the past 3 months, Andreas had been claiming that he and Nadine loved each other and intended to get married once he won her back. While similar situations had occurred before, this time things were different. Nadine was not just with her friend, she was also accompanied by another man. When Andreas noticed this, he instantly became angry, approached Nadine, taking her hand and starting an argument. He attempted to pull her out of the bar, but she resisted. Her 24-year-old friend, Florian Jani, intervened, positioning himself between Andreas and Nadine. He insisted that he was merely a friend and not romantically involved with her, claiming they had only just met. Nonetheless, Andreas was not calmed by this explanation. He was furious that Nadine was spending time with another man and struggled to contain his anger, nearly provoking a fight in the bar. Nadine, Florian, and her brother worked hard to soothe him, prevented Andreas from asserting control over Nadine. After significant effort, they managed to calm him down, though he was still in tears. Feeling overwhelmed, Andreas chose to leave the bar, not wanting to remain in that environment. Kevin stayed behind with Nadine and Florian, worried about their safety. Andreas' outburst was alarming, and now Nadine felt genuinely concerned for her well-being. She didn't want to remain in the bar either, but feared that her ex might be waiting outside. After waiting to ensure Andreas had left, the entire group decided to walk Nadine home. Florian drove her back, even offered to stay the night to help her feel safe. Overwhelmed by fear, Nadine accepted his offer. This choice would prove to have significant consequences. Around 4 a.m., Andreas could no longer contain his jealousy and chose to contact his ex again. When he reached her house, he noticed an unfamiliar car in the driveway, which he recognized as Florian's. It became clear that Andreas hadn't gone home after leaving the bar. Instead, he had remained in the parking lot, secretly watching the group. He observed that Florian was with Nadine, while no one else had left the house. This only fueled his anger. Andreas suspected that Nadine was lying and dating someone new. He felt they were enjoying themselves together without a care. He resolved to confront both Nadine and Florian about the situation. Furious, Andreas jumped out of his car and started ringing the doorbell while banging on the front door. Instead of Nadine and her friend, her father, 59-year-old Rupert, answered. He came out to calm Andreas, who was shouting. Rupert insisted it was too late for arguments and asked Andreas to leave until morning, when they could discuss everything calmly. Rupert was aware of the situation involving Florian at the bar, reassured Andreas that Nadine and Florian were just friends. Understanding and approachable, Rupert shared a cigarette with Andreas, invited him to talk outside on the street. They had a conversation on various topics, as Rupert probably hoped this would soothe Andreas and persuade him to leave. Having known each other for several years, Andreas had become a valued member of Nadine's family. Nadine's parents treated him well, which is why Rupert chose not to call the police to remove his daughter's ex-boyfriend. After speaking with Rupert, Andreas seemed to feel less agitated. He got into his car and drove off, while Rupert returned inside to go to bed. However, just a short distance down the road, Andreas began to feel annoyed again. He came back 15 minutes later, knocking on the door and ringing the bell, which disturbed everyone in the house. Nadine and Kevin came out to confront him. Unlike Rupert, they were very upset, wanted to make it clear that Andreas needed to leave. A new argument broke out at the front door. No one was holding back their words. Nadine was determined to completely cut off ties with her bothersome ex and insisted that there should be no further relationship between them. She demanded that he vanish from her life for good. Kevin backed his sister, stating that their friendship was overdue to Andreas's stalking behavior. He was worried about Andreas's unhealthy actions and wanted nothing more to do with him. Meanwhile, Andreas felt betrayed, convinced that Nadine had been unfaithful and that Kevin was protecting her. He now felt abandoned by Kevin, who he believed should have supported him instead. Before leaving, Andreas tried to find out if Nadine had cheated. However, she firmly told him it was not his concern since they hadn't been dating for several months. At that moment, Andreas had a shocking realization: Nadine had actually broken up with him 3 months ago, and all his attempts to win her back were in vain. No one expected him to pursue her anymore. Feeling angry, Andreas decided to go home, choosing to avoid confronting his feelings of hurt. At 5:30 a.m. on October 6, 2018, Andreas returned to his ex's house. He began knocking on the door and ringing the doorbell, but he did not shout. This time, Rupert responded. He was already very irritated because Andreas had kept the whole family awake the previous night. When Rupert opened the door, he intended to angrily chase Andreas away and threaten to call the police, but he was cut off before he could finish. Andreas pulled out a gun, shot him in the head twice, killing him instantly. He then stepped over Rupert's body and entered the house. Nadine's mother, 51-year-old Andrea, rushed outside when she heard the noise. Tragically, she became the next victim. Andreas then attacked Kevin. He went upstairs and attempted to enter Nadine's room, but Nadine and Florian had locked the door. Andreas determined that the quickest way to reach her was through the balcony. He went outside, climbed the bars on the building's facade, broke the window, opened fire on both Nadine and her friend Florian. This horrific event unfolded within just a few minutes, resulting in the deaths of 5 people. After committing the crime, Andreas drove to the Kitzbühel police station. He arrived around 6 a.m. and placed a gun in front of a police officer at the entrance. He confessed to having just shot 5 people. Additionally, he handed over a knife and a baseball bat, which he had used to break into the Hinterholzer home. He used the bat to shatter a window and gain access to Nadine's room. While the knife was never used, it appears he brought it along for safety. The police discovered 5 bodies at the scene, and the details of their deaths confirmed Andreas's account. Each victim had been attacked at close range with multiple bullets. Florian suffered gunshot wounds to his hands as he tried to defend himself. There was nothing missing from the house. The toxicology report indicated that Andreas was sober, with no alcohol or banned substance in his system. He had no prior legal issues. The entire community of Kitzbühel was in shock over the incident. In this close-knit town, crimes, especially such violent ones, were extremely rare. All the neighbors were familiar with the Nadine family, known for their kindness and helpfulness. They had good relationships with everyone in the area. Both the victim's family and the suspect's family were respected in the community. The community especially mourned the loss of Florian Jani, a talented young hockey player and goalkeeper, who was seen as a promising individual. His compassion for Nadine ultimately led to his tragic death. Friends who knew Nadine well later stated that she had no romantic involvement with Florian. They were simply friends who enjoyed good conversations. However, some speculated that Florian stayed the night to protect her, and suggested that they might have already begun dating. Following the tragedy, a small memorial with photographs of the victims was set up in the local church. Over the course of the month it remained there. More than 1,000 heartfelt notes were left by mourners and caring individuals in memory of the victims. Andreas had been in custody in a special cell designed for inmates needing extra supervision. The police considered him at high risk for end one's own life, so they monitored him closely. He spent 23 hours a day in solitary confinement and was allowed only 1 hour outside to walk in the yard. When the family of Andreas learned what had happened, they addressed the town's residents, expressed their condolences. They also informed the police that a gun belonging to Andreas's brother was missing. The brother had a permit for the firearm, which he kept at home for self-defense. Unfortunately, Andreas knew how to access it and where the key to the safe was. The gun's serial numbers matched, and Andreas confirmed that he had stolen the gun from the house. At a press conference, Andreas's parents expressed their belief that he should face appropriate consequences for his actions. They mentioned that their son's mental health had declined while he was in prison. Despite widespread public anger, the family attempted to explain Andreas's behavior. His father stated that Andreas had been struggling with depression, particularly following his breakup with Nadine. His mother added that while her son might have had mental health challenges, it is unclear why he and his family never pursued mental health treatment. Andreas faces charges for murdering 5 people with a firearm and for breaking and entering. Andreas's lawyer intends to base their defense on his client's questionable mental state. Andreas claims that after hearing hurtful remarks from Nadine and her brother, who attempted to force him out of the house, he lost touch with reality and was unable to control his actions. He states that the only thought in his mind was his desire to kill the cheater. He described this experience as a state of emotional turmoil. The lawyer hoped this would reduce his client's culpability. However, the prosecution argued that Andreas was merely pretending and insisted that he was aware of his actions, he fit to stand trial. The lawyer disagreed with this assessment. In the end, the court ruled that there were no grounds for reducing Andreas's criminal responsibility. Andreas believed he deserved a fair punishment and did not want to evade responsibility for his crime. From the outset, he intended to confess. He willingly went to the police station and had no plans to take back his confession made the morning after the massacre. His lawyers stressed Andreas's mental state during the case. Assessments revealed that he suffered from a disorder that left him with 2 choices: either walk away and forget or return to kill. There was no middle ground. Once he understood that he could not regain his relationship with Nadine, he became obsessed with the notion that Nadine should not belong to anyone. As soon as the murder trial started, Andreas confessed to the crime. He believed that confessing would make the legal process easier and reduce trauma for the victims' families, as well as for himself. He shared details about his relationship with Nadine, discussing his jealousy and the reasons behind his actions. He described Nadine as an attractive girl who attracted many admirers, which fueled his jealousy. Andreas held traditional views about women and felt that a good woman should behave differently. He couldn't accept Nadine's decision to break up, insisting that she was his property and that she shouldn't date or spend time with other men, even as just friends. On the night of the incident, he was also affected by Kevin's betrayal. Nadine's parents were annoyed with Andreas, and he was afraid of losing her entire family, with whom he felt closer than to his own. He claimed that after the breakup, his family did not provide the support he desperately needed, leading him to lose 10 kilograms. Ultimately, in a moment of rage, Andreas lost control and killed them all. Andreas showed remorse and offered condolences to the families of his victims, but some believed he was merely trying to get a lighter sentence. Prosecution witnesses testified that Nadine continuously told Andreas that their relationship was over. Despite this, he kept asking for another chance, hoping to get back together, and he stalked her without truly grasping the situation. During the hearing, Andreas came across as insecure. He spoke softly, often mumbling to himself, and cried during emotional moments. At times, he seemed to misunderstand the gravity of what happened, viewing it as an accident. The prosecution contended that there was clear evidence of a brutal, premeditated murder involving 5 victims. They argued that Andreas had ample time to think through his actions as he drove to and from his ex-girlfriend's house. When he returned home, he took 3 items: a gun, a knife, and a baseball bat, indicating that he had meticulously planned his actions. The choice to take a knife suggested he intended to ensure there would be no survivors among Nadine's family and her friend Florian. During the hearing, the prosecution pointed out that Andreas had changed his marital status on social media from engaged to widower. Andreas claimed that this change occurred shortly after Nadine's murder, but some friends and acquaintances suggested that Andreas may have done so intentionally beforehand. Just a few months after their breakup, he started reacting more aggressively to Nadine's rejections. He often expressed a desire for her to be dead and sent messages accusing her of dating someone new, voicing a wish to kill that person. At the time, these statements were not taken seriously. The lawyer argued that these were simply emotional responses to rejection, which Andreas struggled to accept. However, this did not necessarily mean he intended to kill her. Nadine's friends mentioned that she had been feeling fearful of her ex lately and had been trying to avoid him as much as she could. She discovered that Andreas had been engaging in violent acts, such as beheading chickens with a machete and torturing cats. His actions appeared to be quite dangerous. During the trial, the defendant struggled to answer many questions, especially regarding why, in addition to Nadine, her friend Florian, brother Kevin, and her parents were killed. The lawyer argued that this showed Andreas lacked control over his actions and didn't fully grasp what was happening. However, the Austrian justice system made a definitive ruling: the murder of 5 people could not be seen as a mitigating factor. The idea that Andreas was insane was dismissed. By the end of the trial, he was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison. Nevertheless, this doesn't mean he will be incarcerated for life. In Austria, individuals with life sentences are often released after an average of 21 years. Furthermore, the lawyer vowed to continue advocating for his client's release and planned to file appeals. In Barrhaven, a suburb southwest of Ottawa, Canada's capital, lived Bhupinder Paul Gill and his wife, Jagtar Gill, along with their 3 children. On January 29, 2014, which was their 17th wedding anniversary, it was around noon when Bhupinder Paul set off to the grocery store with his daughter, Harjinder. They planned to buy a cake to celebrate their anniversary and flowers for Jagtar. Jagtar was resting at home because she had just been released from the hospital the day before after undergoing hernia surgery. On that day, Jagtar's other 2 children were at school, while their eldest daughter, Harjinder, had taken a day off from high school to care for her mother. Bhupinder Paul and his daughter arrived home around 1 p.m. While Bhupinder Paul began to unload groceries from the car, Harjinder headed toward the front door. She noticed that it was unlocked, even though they had securely locked it before leaving for the store. Harjinder entered the house and called out. When she received no response, she felt anxious as she walked toward the living room. To her shock, she found her mother lying on the floor. As she approached, she saw blood on her mother's body. Filled with fear, Harjinder screamed, causing Bhupinder Paul to rush inside. Bhupinder Paul was bewildered when he saw his wife lying on the floor. Harjinder ran upstairs to call an ambulance, only to discover that all the phone wires had been cut. Regaining his composure, Bhupinder Paul used his cell phone to call 911. He was crying profusely. The operator, recognizing his distress, told him to remain calm, lay his wife flat, and try to perform CPR. But as soon as he heard this, Bhupinder Paul became silent. Understanding how serious the situation was, the 911 operator promptly sent an ambulance and police to their home. Shortly after, several police cars and an ambulance arrived at Bhupinder Paul's house. Paramedics quickly assessed the situation, confirmed that Jagtar Gill had already passed away, leaving them unable to help. The police, already on the scene, cordoned off the house. Meanwhile, a woman from the neighborhood approached and began looking through the window at the scene. A police officer asked her if she was related to the Gill family. The woman explained that she lived next door and was friends with Jagtar. She had come over after noticing the police and ambulance, worried about what had happened. The officers did not share much information with her but did tell her that Jagtar Gill had died. Upon hearing this, the neighbor left in tears. The forensic team investigating the case confirmed that Jagtar had been attacked with a heavy object and stabbed multiple times across her body. However, no heavy object or knife was discovered near her body. Following this, police detectives advised Gill family to stay elsewhere for a few weeks so that the forensic team could properly secure the crime scene and collect evidence. Later, while searching the house, police officers found a pair of rubber cleaning gloves. Oddly, one of the gloves was missing a finger. The officers also recovered blood-stained knives hidden beneath some dirty dishes in the kitchen sink. Blood spatters were discovered on the living room carpet, the sofa, the stairs leading to the second floor, the upstairs bathroom floor, and even inside the wash basin. Additionally, the police found a 5-kilogram weightlifting rod in the basement, placed on top of a box of Christmas decorations. This rod also had blood stains, prompting the investigator to consider it as crucial evidence. The police did not consider it a robbery because Barrhaven is known to be a safe neighborhood. The doors and locks of the house were intact, and nothing was missing. Jagtar's body still had all her valuable jewelry on. Additionally, the area around Jagtar's house had several new homes being built, which meant that builders and construction companies had set up CCTV cameras to protect their equipment from theft. After examining the CCTV footage, police found no signs of suspicious behavior or concerning individuals. They then spoke with local residents, who provided insights about Jagtar's background. Jagtar moved to Canada in 1994 at 23 years old with her parents and siblings, but the family returned to India in 1997. Later that same year, Jagtar married Bhupenderpal Gill, who was 20 years old. After their wedding, they came back to Canada and settled in Ottawa. Initially, Jagtar worked at an electronics company, while Bhupenderpal drove a taxi. To supplement their income, they also delivered pizzas at night and newspapers early in the morning. 2 years after their marriage, they welcomed their first daughter, Harjinder, followed by another daughter and a son. At the time of Jagtar's death, Harjinder was 15, their second daughter, Balwinder, was 10, and their youngest son, Satnam, was 8. Jagtar continued her work at an electronics company, while Bhupenderpal secured a permanent job as a bus driver with OC Transpo. They worked hard to save money for a new house and eventually bought a home with a double garage in the Barrhaven suburb of Ottawa. When their new house was ready, the entire Gill family moved in, including Bhupenderpal's parents. Jagtar was happy in her new home, but no one could predict the threat that would lead to a tragic murder. On February 20, 2014, many members of the local Sikh community came together at the Gurdwara Sahib in Ottawa to pray for Jagtar's soul. Jagtar Gill had suffered such severe injuries that her family decided to keep the casket closed, allowing only a few individuals to see her face one last time. Meanwhile, the police continued their investigation. Detectives considered the possibility that the killer might be a family member who would try to conceal evidence again. To investigate this theory, the detectives placed a similar weightlifting rod, smeared with fake blood, inside a box of Christmas decorations in the basement and set up a hidden camera nearby. A few days later, the camera captured Bhupenderpal, just 10 days after Jagtar's death, opening the Christmas box and attempting to conceal the weightlifting rod in his jacket, but it was too large to fit. The next day, Bhupenderpal returned to the basement and successfully hid a weightlifting bar in his pants. Unbeknownst to him, police officers were watching everything through surveillance cameras. After leaving his house with the bar concealed, officers followed him as he traveled about a kilometer to a nearby wooded area, where he discarded the weightlifting bar in the bushes. Once he was gone, the officers retrieved it. They doubted Bhupenderpal could be the killer. To verify his alibi, they checked CCTV footage from the supermarket to confirm his presence there at the time of Jagtar's death. The footage corroborated his statement, but it left one lingering question: why did Bhupenderpal throw the metal bar into the bushes? To investigate the situation, the officers created a fake news story claiming they had discovered a blood-stained weightlifting rod linked to Jagtar's murder in a wooded area. After this story was published, the officers waited to see how Bhupenderpal would react. Upon reading the news, Bhupenderpal went directly to the police station and confessed that he had thrown the weightlifting rod into the bushes. When asked why, Bhupenderpal explained that he found the rod near Jagtar's body. At that time, he was scared that the attacker might still be in the house, so he picked up the rod and searched the entire house, including the basement, but found no one. Later, he discarded the rod in a corner of the basement. However, he forgot to tell the police that the rod was initially next to Jagtar's body. A week later, seeing the rod still in the basement made him anxious, so he decided to throw it into the bushes near their home. After the interrogation, a team of police officers searched the area around Jagtar's house and spoke with some neighbors. They spoke to a man named Scott Fewer, who was a close friend of Bhupenderpal. Scott said he visited Bhupenderpal the day after Jagtar's death to offer his condolences. However, he told the police that Bhupenderpal did not appear to be sad about his wife's passing. Scott noted that the relationship between Bhupenderpal and Jagtar Gill was unusual, as they frequently seemed to be upset with one another. He also mentioned that Bhupinderpal had a close friendship with a 35-year-old woman named Gurpreet Ronald, who lived nearby. According to Scott, Bhupinderpal and Gurpreet interacted very comfortably, suggesting they had known each other for a long time. After Gurpreet's name was mentioned in the case, the police invited her to the station for questioning. Upon her arrival, an officer recognized her as the woman who had been seen trying to look through the window of Jagtar's house around the time of the murder. Gurpreet had moved to Canada with her parents at a young age and later married a white Canadian man named Jason. Although they had been married for 13 years, their relationship had recently been strained by frequent arguments, largely due to suspicions of infidelity on both sides. A female detective then began questioning Gurpreet in another room, asking how she knew Jagtar. Gurpreet responded that they were not only neighbors but also very good friends. She used to drive buses for the same company as Bhupinderpal. During further questioning, Gurpreet mentioned that she was quite close to Jagtar Gill. They would often go shopping together and spend their free time talking. The detective's next question focused on Gurpreet's activities on the day of the murder, January 29th. Gurpreet said she woke up early, had breakfast, and started cleaning her house. Later, she called her friend Rosa to plan a meeting for the afternoon. Rosa, an interior designer, needed help with a project for a friend's house. Before meeting Rosa at around 12:30 p.m., Gurpreet went shopping. The investigator asked which shopping center she visited and what she bought. Gurpreet initially said she went to a store but found nothing worth purchasing, so she returned home empty-handed. However, she later changed her story, saying she encountered Bhupinderpal and his daughter Harjinder at the store, where they were buying cabbage. Gurpreet also bought a cabbage, got home around 1:30 p.m. Upon returning, she noticed an ambulance outside Bhupinderpal's house and tried to look through the window to see what was happening. After this, the female detective asked Gurpreet about the relationship between Bhupinderpal and Jagtar Gill. Gurpreet described Jagtar Gill as a very traditional woman who adheres to Indian and Punjabi customs. She volunteered additional information about her character without being prompted. She also mentioned that she frequently communicated with Bhupinderpal through calls, messages because they worked at the same job and usually had overlapping shifts. After this, the female interrogator asked Gurpreet about the interior designer, Rosa, who was supposed to visit her. Gurpreet explained that when she returned home from shopping, she found her friend Rosa waiting at her front door. The interrogator observed that Gurpreet was providing overly detailed answers, as if she felt the need to justify herself. In the interview, the interrogator noticed that Gurpreet had a bandage on one of her fingers. When asked about it, Gurpreet said she had cut her finger while cutting potatoes when the knife slipped. However, the finger she injured was the same one that had a cut on the glove found at the crime scene. The police interrogation concluded for now, but they then spoke to Gurpreet's friend Rosa. She reported that she and Gurpreet actually met at about 3:30 p.m. on January 29th, not at 1:30 p.m. as Gurpreet had previously said. Rosa mentioned that she had asked Gurpreet why an ambulance and police were present on their street that day. Gurpreet told her that Jagtar Gill, their neighbor, had been stabbed and killed. This information surprised the police because at that point, they had not yet allowed Gurpreet into the house or revealed any details about Jagtar Gill's death. Gurpreet was aware of who in the Gill family had been murdered and what weapon was used, which raised the police's suspicions about her and Bhupinderpal. It is not unusual for an attacker to accidentally injure themselves during a stabbing. As a result, the police began wiretapping the phones of Gurpreet and Bhupinderpal, hoping they would discuss Jagtar's murder, but the wiretaps did not capture any relevant conversations. When the police reviewed the call history from a month prior to the murder, they discovered that the two individuals had communicated about 250 times during that time, averaging 8 to 9 calls a day, even on the day of the murder. However, all the evidence collected so far was circumstantial and did not directly connect either of them to the crime. Among the evidence from the crime scene was DNA found near Jagtar's body. Investigators also noted a cut on Gurpreet Ronald's hand. They needed a DNA sample from Gurpreet because if she was connected to the murder, her DNA should match the samples found at the scene. To collect Gurpreet's DNA for testing, a plainclothes police investigator knocked on Gurpreet's door, claiming to be from the construction industry conducting a survey. She told Gurpreet that by participating, she could enter a draw for prizes, 6 months of free mortgage payments for the winner and a vacation for the runner-up. After hearing this, Gurpreet agreed to take part, filled out a form, and sealed it in an envelope with her saliva. The investigator took the envelope and left. This allowed the police to collect Gurpreet's DNA sample, which they sent for testing. Additionally, the police employed other tactics to gather evidence against Gurpreet. At one point, they left a note on her car that simply read "Killer." They hoped this would prompt her to call Bhupinder Paul to discuss the murder. Instead, Gurpreet reported the note to the police and chose not to mention it to Bhupinder Paul at all. Days later, the DNA test results revealed that Gurpreet's DNA was present in multiple areas of the house. Specifically, it was found near Jagtar's body, in the kitchen, and in several places in the upstairs bedroom. This strong evidence led the police to arrest Gurpreet on May 7, 2014, charging her with the first-degree murder of Jagtar Gill. Just 6 days after Gurpreet's arrest, on May 13, 2014, Bhupinder Paul was also arrested. The police identified both men as co-accused, and they faced trial together. In court, both individuals were present, and from the start, they attempted to demonstrate their innocence. However, the investigators presented a case summary to the judge that outlined the motive for Jagtar's murder and the details of how it was executed. The summary indicated that Bhupinder Paul had been unhappy in his marriage with Jagtar Gill for some time but felt unable to divorce her due to the negative stigma surrounding divorce in their community. Additionally, Bhupinder Paul and Gurpreet had been involved in an affair for 4 years prior to Jagtar's death. Together, they conspired to murder Jagtar in order to continue their relationship. On January 29, Bhupinder Paul took his elder daughter, Harjinder, out of the house for a specific reason. Before leaving, he placed a metal weightlifting bar near the stairs so that Gurpreet could easily find it and use it to kill Jagtar Gill when she entered the house. Following their plan, Gurpreet approached Jagtar under the guise of borrow some tools. When the time was right, she attacked Jagtar with the weightlifting bar, but this initial assault did not kill her. Gurpreet then went to the kitchen, grabbed a knife, and stabbed Jagtar multiple times. Ultimately, it was the final cut to Jagtar's throat that led to her death. Gurpreet chose not to call Bhupinder Paul to inform him about the murder to avoid leaving any record of the conversation. Instead, she went directly to the supermarket and spoke to him face to face. Even more disturbing than the murder itself was that Bhupinder Paul sent his daughter into the house first, knowing that her mother's lifeless body was inside. The little girl, who was bringing a bouquet for her mother, was forced to witness a traumatic scene that would likely stay with her forever. In the court proceedings, all the police investigators gave their testimonies one by one, along with Bhupinder Paul's neighbor, Scott, an interior designer. Some post-mortem photographs of Jagtar Gill were also presented in court. However, when these images were shown, Jagtar's family members could not bear to look and left the courtroom immediately. The police presented a key witness in court named Suzanne Shields, a life coach who advises people on maintaining happiness. After hearing about the murder in the news, she contacted the police and revealed that 1 year prior, Bhupinder Paul and Gurpreet sought her advice on their relationship. Susan mentioned that they were determined to stay together and had expressed strong feelings of hatred towards Jagtar Gill. Her testimony helped the police establish the motive for Jagtar's murder in court. Gurpreet and Bhupinder Paul had different lawyers representing them, and although their lawyers told various stories, the police had already collected ample evidence. July 20, 2016, the jury declared Gurpreet Ronald and Bhupinder Paul Gill guilty of first-degree murder. They are now serving life sentences and will not be eligible for parole until 25 years later. After this, Jagtar's niece, Ramandeep Chahal, addressed the media outside the court. She read a statement that was prepared by her family. In this statement, they shared their deep feelings for Jagtar's death. Following their 2016 convictions, Bhupinder Paul Gill and Gurpreet Ronald appealed their first-degree murder sentences, arguing procedural errors in the original trial. In 2019, the Ontario Court of Appeal ordered a retrial, citing issues with the jury instructions. The retrial, held in 2021, reaffirmed the guilty verdicts for both defendants, upholding their life sentences with no parole eligibility for 25 years. This outcome solidified the court's findings that Bhupinder Paul and Gurpreet conspired to murder Jagtar Gill to continue their affair, leaving the Gill family to grapple with their ongoing loss. The murder of Jagtar Gill in Barhaven, Canada, shattered a family and stunned a community, revealing a chilling betrayal orchestrated by her husband, Bhupinder Paul Gill, and his lover, Gurpreet Ronald. Their conspiracy, driven by a clandestine affair, led to Jagtar's brutal death, leaving her 3 children to endure profound loss. The 2016 convictions and 2021 retrial delivered justice, sentencing both to life imprisonment with no parole for 25 years, yet no punishment can heal the wounds inflicted on the Gill family. This tragedy serves as a stark reminder that trust, once broken, can unravel lives, underscoring the enduring need for compassion and accountability in the pursuit of justice. Michelle Rivera was born on November 18, 1969, as the 4th of 7 children in her family. She grew up in a small village in the Philippines, where her family struggled with poverty. Her parents could barely provide for their children. From a young age, Michelle was known for her beauty, intelligence, and kindness. She helped her mother with household chores, took care of her younger siblings. Her parents emphasized the importance of education for success, so Michelle focused diligently on her studies. When she turned 16, she moved to attend college for a degree in business administration. Unfortunately, her parents could not afford her tuition, and after the first semester, she had to drop out. Instead of returning home, Michelle stayed with her aunt, who lived near a U.S. naval base. There, she worked at a clothing store and learned English, hoping to eventually move to the United States. During this time, she met Americans for the first time, which fueled her dream of immigrating to the U.S. for a better life. At the age of 18, she reached out to a dating agency that connected her with men from the United States. This pursuit of a husband overseas introduced her to Jonathan Nice. Jonathan was born in 1950. He was the eldest of 4 sons in a deeply religious Catholic family. Although he was quiet and reserved, he had a unique perspective on life. He was also quite creative, with a passion for writing stories and poems. In 1957, the Nice family moved to a bigger house in Collegeville, Pennsylvania, after Jonathan's father got a better-paying job. Jonathan was very good at mathematics and the natural sciences, but he had trouble making friends, especially with girls. He started attending Temple University in Philadelphia in 1968. After 8 years, he earned a bachelor's degree, and 2 years later, he completed a master's degree. By 1983, he had received his doctorate, began working on his dissertation in Los Angeles. After successfully defending his thesis, he found a job at East Carolina University in Greenville by 1988. Ambitious Jonathan became a professor of medical sciences. However, he faced challenges in his personal life. His first marriage to a woman of a different faith ended partly because of their religious differences. Despite this, Jonathan remained hopeful and continued to seek new love. In 1988, Michelle got her first letter from him. He introduced himself as a successful and wealthy professor. The accompanying photo showed him as young, tall, and handsome, with blonde hair. What caught Michelle's attention the most was that he was American. Excited, she replied to his letters, sharing details about herself and her dreams. Over the next few months, they developed a romantic relationship, sending letters, postcards, and photos to each other, even started making phone calls. In October 1989, Jonathan shared his feelings for Michelle, and shortly after, they decided to meet in person. By May 1990, he announced that he had purchased a plane ticket to the Philippines for their wedding. Michelle was excited about this meeting but was taken aback when they finally met, as Jonathan looked quite different from the young man in the photo. He was an overweight, older man with medium-length blonde hair, appearing much older than his actual age. Despite her surprise, Michelle kept her feelings hidden, and they spent the next 2 days together. She later confessed that she had doubts about the wedding from the start, not only because he didn't resemble the photo, but also because some uncomfortable truths were becoming clear. However, after spending time together, she began to feel attached to him. Jonathan had changed his birth date on his passport to make himself younger. His marriage certificate stated that he was born on May 26, 1958, which suggested he was 32, but in reality, he was 40 years old. 21-year-old Michelle felt uncertain about her decision, but her wish to move to the United States was stronger. After their marriage was registered, Jonathan went back to the U.S., leaving Michelle in the Philippines to sort out her American visa. Upon returning, he kept their marriage a secret from everyone, including his parents and brothers, acting as if nothing had happened. During this time, he attended a cancer conference in Hawaii and also traveled to the Philippines, where he was supposed to give lectures. People assumed he was just on a business trip. Meanwhile, Jonathan opened a bank account for Michelle and sent money to support her family. He also bought them a new house in the Philippines. However, by winter, Michelle had still not moved in with her husband. Her visa wouldn't be ready until the end of March the following year. Jonathan then bought Michelle a one-way ticket to California for their honeymoon. In April 1991, Michelle left her family to fly to California. The deception continued. Jonathan was embarrassed about how he met Michelle through correspondence in the Philippines, so he concocted a story about falling in love at first sight during a conference there. He maintained this lie for years, and Michelle supported it because she was not proud of her past either. After they returned to New Jersey, Jonathan rented an apartment for them, and a few months later, Michelle became pregnant. They welcomed their first child, Alex. Both parents doted on him. Jonathan devoted all his free time to his son, and Michelle frequently sent pictures to her parents. Michelle became pregnant again in early 1993, and on November, she gave birth to their second son, Trevor. During this time, Jonathan collaborated with other experts to enhance asthma medications. In the spring of 1995, Jonathan left the university to start his own pharmaceutical company. He began promoting a new drug, claiming it had been tested on animals and had no side effects. Slowly, the money started coming in. Those who worked with Jonathan recognized that he was, at best, overstating the truth. However, he had a talent for presenting things in a way that made others believe him. Small falsehoods turned into a larger deception. Jonathan appeared convincing and continued to attract investments for drug development. The business was expanding, and the drug trials seemed very promising, at least on paper. By the end of 2000, Jonathan was getting ready for drug trials in London. Their relationship seemed strong, they were enjoying life together. They had a daughter, Samantha, and lived in a spacious new house in an upscale neighborhood of Hopewell Township, New Jersey, a charming town with a population of 4,000, situated on an old horse farm. However, Jonathan felt the property wasn't green enough, so in 2001, he hired a gardener named Miguel de Jesus. Miguel was a 31-year-old Puerto Rican with years of experience in landscape design and great references. He completed the landscaping for their home at a cost of $50,000. Jonathan invested generously in the project. Michelle, who did not have a job and spent most of her time at home, interacted with Miguel more frequently than Jonathan did, leading to a mutual attraction between them. By spring 2002, the business started facing issues. Jonathan had to cut his staff down to 12 employees. The company invested around $40 million in different studies, but they yielded no convincing results. Jonathan felt mounting pressure from investors, and funding for his projects was halted. Desperate for cash, he took out a $200,000 loan against his home. These financial struggles began to take a toll on his marriage. During this time, Michelle confided in a friend that she wanted a divorce. In the summer of 2002, her father came to visit the nice family and intended to stay for a while to spend time with his daughter and grandchildren. He often spent months with them, cooking Filipino dishes. During this visit, he observed firsthand the deterioration of the marriage. Jonathan was drinking heavily, and the couple argued almost daily. The parents was revealed that Jonathan had lied about his age, which shocked everyone, including Michelle. the troubled state of their marriage continued to decline. She made the decision to get a divorce, but she knew it would require careful planning. The financial situation was entirely in Jonathan's hands, leaving Michelle feeling trapped. She needed help to overcome this challenge. That's why Miguel de Jesus appeared to be a promising choice. He had lived in the US for 14 years, worked in landscape design, and had a steady job with regular clients. Miguel had been married for 5 years following his previous divorce. He had not paid alimony and had accumulated significant debt. He was also hiding because a warrant had been issued to freeze his accounts. To conceal his identity, he used a fake ID with a different name. Michelle started giving him expensive gifts to show her affection. A secret relationship formed between them. As tensions rose, Michelle and Jonathan grew more distant. In January 2003, Michelle's friend became worried when she couldn't reach her by phone, fearing something was wrong. She was aware that Jonathan had problems with alcohol, was facing significant financial struggles, and that a divorce was imminent. Concerned that he might have harmed Michelle, the friend decided to visit their house to check on her. However, Michelle was hesitant to talk about her husband and avoided discussing their relationship altogether. Eventually, the friend left. In the following months, the friend made several attempts to reach out to Michelle, but each effort failed. It appeared that Michelle was intentionally avoiding everyone. She slowly withdrew from her family and friends and did not return their calls. In February 2003, Michelle traveled to the Philippines to see her family, with Jonathan joining her. Initially, everything seemed to be going well, but soon the effects of her alcohol abuse became evident, leading to daily arguments between them. A group of investors started talks to purchase Jonathan Nice's company, which resulted in him facing intense pressure and eventually losing his CEO position. In March 2003, even with his financial difficulties, Jonathan maintained a lavish lifestyle, with monthly mortgage payments of around $6,500. He continued to hide his financial issues from everyone, even planned to launch a new business. He focused on research to create drugs aimed at preventing lung cancer in smokers. He rarely left his home, dedicated himself to his research, and even authored a book of poems for children. This situation made it difficult for Michelle to meet her lover, Miguel. As her anxiety grew, she started coming up with various excuses to secretly maintain her affair. On June 26, 2003, Miguel's wife found out about his affair and kicked him out of their home. Meanwhile, Jonathan was aware of his wife's infidelity but didn't show it at first. On July 10, Jonathan went to the police to report that a man had called him twice, demanding $500,000 in exchange for video and audio recordings of intimate moments with his wife, Michelle. Jonathan recognized the caller's voice as Miguel. On July 23, Jonathan called Miguel and threatened him, insisting that he should never approach Michelle again. Miguel, however, denied having any connection with Michelle. After these events, Michelle lost access to her bank account. Jonathan became angry and restricted her funds, providing only $300 a month for groceries. This situation led Michelle into deep despair, and she stopped sending money to her relatives in the Philippines. When their youngest daughter turned 5, Michelle enrolled her daughter in kindergarten. With more free time, she took a part-time job as a consultant in the cosmetics department, which gave her a sense of financial independence and allowed her to escape her husband's control. To stop his wife from keeping in touch with Miguel, Jonathan went to the police and reported that Miguel had made threats against them. This helped them secure a restraining order against Miguel. During this time, Jonathan faced depression and started consulting a psychiatrist. He received medication that was supposed to help him, but instead, it worsened his emotional state. One day, while at his parents' house, he broke down in tears and admitted that Michelle had a boyfriend, which left him frightened of losing her. In an attempt to regain control, he tried to convince Michelle to quit her job, but she refused to comply. Jonathan launched a perfume company, hoping to work alongside his wife. He planned to replicate the scent of the national flower of the Philippines and believed this venture would bring them financial success, strengthen their marriage, and restore their relationship. However, his possessive behavior worsened the situation. Michelle continued her affairs, did not wear her wedding ring to work. During Thanksgiving, When they met Jonathan's parents, the tension was palpable. They barely communicated or interacted with one another. January 15, 2004, began as a normal day for the family. Schools were closed due to snowfall, keeping the children at home. Michelle went shopping while Jonathan spent time with the younger children. After lunch, Michelle returned home to get ready for her evening shift, leaving around 4 p.m. Jonathan tried to call Michelle several times, but she didn't answer. After her shift ended, CCTV footage showed her leaving the store and walking to her car. At 9:54 p.m., she entered Miguel's car. They rented a motel room for 2 hours, during which Jonathan continued to call Michelle, but she chose not to respond. After they were intimate, they talked for a bit, and Michelle mentioned that she suspected Jonathan was tracking her. Once their time together was over, Michelle got into her car, planning to drive home. At 12:30 a.m., she left the parking lot to drive approximately 15 kilometers home. Meanwhile, Jonathan, unable to sleep, waited outside their home for his wife. Early the next morning, a man was driving on a deserted road in rural New Jersey, heading to a friend's place. While driving, he glanced at a shallow creek where he planned to go fishing later. Suddenly, he spotted a dark car with its engine running, parked oddly on the riverbank with its front wheels partially submerged in the water. He thought little of it, assuming it was likely a local fisherman or deer hunter who had stopped for a reason. So, he continued driving without stopping. About an hour later, the man returned with his friend and noticed the car still in the same spot. This seemed unusual, so he decided to investigate. The engine was running, but the headlights were off. On the passenger side, he discovered blood. Concerned, he called the police. Within an hour, a team of forensic experts and detectives arrived from both the local district and a neighboring one, as violent incidents were rare in this area. It was cordoned off and searched thoroughly, even from the air. At first, it appeared to be an accident. However, the condition of the body contradicted this. The car showed no signs of damage, which was impossible. Additionally, the victim was barefoot, which added to the suspicion that this was a murder made to look like an accident. The car's registration number was verified in the database, revealing that it belonged to Jonathan Nice. Sitting in the driver's seat was Michelle, 34, who had a fractured skull. The injuries appeared too severe to have been caused by an accident, prompting authorities to reconsider. Notably, the driver's seat was pushed all the way back, which was unusual since Michelle was too small to drive comfortably in that position. There was also a suitcase containing women's items wedged under the seat. Large footprints leading from the car to the road indicated that a man had walked away from the vehicle. The snow footprints became a significant piece of evidence in the investigation. At 9:13 a.m., 2 officers arrived at the Nice house to speak with Jonathan. Earlier, around 6:13 a.m., another police officer had responded to an alarm in the garage, but Jonathan was now unaccounted for. The children answered the door. They told the police that their father had left, their mother had gone to work the day before and had not come back. At this point, the detectives realized there were significant issues in Michelle and Jonathan's relationship. They waited for Jonathan, who recounted the events of the previous evening. He had not seen her since 4 p.m., which wasn't surprising due to their family issues. After learning that Michelle was dead, Jonathan was informed of his rights because his family was under suspicion. He shared details about their troubled relationship, his daily routine, and mentioned a gardener who extorted money from him and threatened their family. He appeared indifferent about his wife's death. However, at the end of the meet, he broke down in tears when he asked how to explain her death to their children. The detectives interviewed Michelle's friend, Larissa Seuss. She had no knowledge of any physical violence between the couple but was aware that Michelle was unhappy and wanted to leave her husband. Jonathan did not notify Michelle's family about her death. They learned of it through a newspaper article. Jonathan's father called him after receiving information from the doctor about the accident. A Filipino man had been living with them for several months and witnessed their relationship grow. He suspected that Jonathan might have tampered with the car to cause the accident. The medical examiner's findings revealed the severe violence Michelle experienced. She had 3 deep lacerations on her forehead, exposing her bone. A blunt force injury to the back of her head caused bleeding, but it did not kill her instantly. There was even bloody foam in her lungs, suggesting she survived for a while after the injury. The autopsy report confirmed that she died from blunt force trauma to her head, which resulted in a skull fracture and hemorrhage. When the police interviewed Miguel de Jesus, he quickly called a lawyer. He confessed that he had been in a relationship with Michelle for several months. Miguel provided a detailed account of the last evening he spent with her before her death. He did not appear suspicious and had an alibi. Miguel stated that Michelle had often told him that Jonathan was physically abusing her and had even restrained her to the bed as punishment. As a result, the police secured a search warrant for the Nice family's house. As the investigation continues, Jonathan becomes increasingly suspicious. When detectives came to arrest him, he took almost 10 minutes to answer the door, suggesting he was trying to conceal something. It was later discovered that he had quickly removed the soles from his shoes, cut them into small pieces, and hidden them in various locations around the house, including among some Christmas decorations. The patterns on the soles of the shoes were later matched to evidence found at the crime scene. During his questioning, Jonathan's first comment was about Michelle's infidelity. He still repeated the events from the previous night and the day, admitting that he last saw his wife alive around 4 p.m. as she was getting ready for her job. After she left, he never saw her again. When police raided Nice's home, they found a blood-stained baseball bat and Jonathan's clothes soaked in pink water in the washing machine. Police also found blood in the garage and bloody towels hidden in the chimney. The investigation confirmed that all of the stains were from the victim's blood. When directly asked about the suspicion of killing his wife, Jonathan denied it, claiming he had been framed and attempting to shift the blame to his wife's lover. Over time, he began to show signs of distress. Jonathan later told police that his wife had attacked him in the garage with what he believed was a knife when she got home. According to him, Michelle fell to the floor of the garage, and he accidentally smashed her head into the floor during the struggle that resulted in her death. Afterward, Jonathan placed Michelle in the driver's seat of her car and used an ice pick to operate the accelerator and brake pedals while sitting in the passenger seat. He drove about a mile until he found a creek, then drove off the road and into the water. At that point, he left the car running and walked home. In the garage, authorities discovered cut-out shoe soles hidden throughout, which matched the footprints found at the scene of the accident. Additionally, there was evidence of blood in the garage. The prosecution claimed that Michelle wanted to leave the marriage, but Jonathan could not allow that to happen, so he attacked her. They believed that Jonathan made up a story about Miguel trying to blackmail him with intimate photos, perhaps in an attempt to scare off Miguel and save his marriage. Miguel testified that Jonathan had been aware of his wife's affair for a long time, suggesting that the murder was not a spontaneous act of passion but rather a premeditated one. Miguel also stated that Jonathan had threatened to kill him. Jonathan was desperate to save his marriage and did not want Michelle to leave amicably, which is why he aimed to remove Michelle. The prosecutor believed that Jonathan had been waiting for Michelle to return from seeing her lover that evening to confront her. As soon as she parked the car in the garage, he approached her, sparking an argument. They moved inside the house, where the fight continued, with Michelle stating her desire to leave and quickly packing her belongings. Jonathan eventually realized he had lost his wife after 15 years of marriage and that nothing could change that. When she got into the car with her things, he became furious, pulling her out with such strength that he nearly injured her arm. He then threw her onto the concrete floor and struck her on the back of the head with a bat. Despite being injured, Michelle tried to stand up but was slipping in her own blood. Jonathan continued to slam her head against the concrete. According to the medical examiner, Michelle survived for approximately 10 minutes after being hit before choking on her blood. Jonathan suddenly realized that he had killed Michelle. He placed her body in the driver's seat of the car, gathered up the bloody items, and put them in the trunk. It was about 2 a.m. He pushed the driver's seat back as far as it would go, sat next to her in the driver's seat, and drove out of the garage. Jonathan operated the pedals as if they were her feet, while keeping his hands on the steering wheel over hers. A couple of miles away, he found a narrow part of the river where he planned to drive the car into the water to make it look like an accident. However, He was careless and left behind a significant amount of evidence and footprints leading from the submerged car back to his home. He also forgot to move the driver's seat back into its original position, which further exposed his attempt to stage the scene. At around 3 a.m., Jonathan returned to the garage and started cleaning it thoroughly with paper towels and bleach. By about 6 a.m., he accidentally triggered the alarm, prompting a quick response from the police. In a hurry, he scattered bloody clothes and bloody towel into the chimney. After that, Jonathan went to bed and pretended to be asleep for the rest of the night. Jonathan Nice was charged with first-degree murder and concealment of evidence. His trial started in June 2005. He maintained that he had acted in self-defense. The professor employed a skilled lawyer who argued convincingly that Michelle and her lover had plotted to extort money from Jonathan and had intended to kill him that night. According to the lawyer, Jonathan managed to defend himself, which tragically led to Michelle's death. The defense also highlighted that Jonathan panicked upon realizing he had accidentally killed her. The question still lingered: if Jonathan was acting in self-defense, why didn't he call 911 right away to explain what happened? Why did he feel the need to cover up the incident? The lawyer suggested that Jonathan was afraid of being sent to prison. The defense attorney argued that Jonathan was too intelligent to kill his wife in such an obvious way by causing a head injury. As a brilliant scientist, he could have created a more subtle method to avoid detection, like developing a new poison. The defense attorney was convincing and successfully reduced the charge to manslaughter in a moment of passion. As a result, Jonathan received a lighter sentence of just 8 years. The judge showed leniency because Jonathan had made significant contributions to society, particularly in the battle against a deadly disease. After the verdict, Jonathan said he still loved Michelle and felt regret about how things had ended up. Even though he received a light sentence, an appeal was submitted in 2007, but it was denied. Jonathan's parents, who are U.S. citizens, were given custody of the children, Samantha, Alex, and Trevor, while the parents of Michelle, who are from the Philippines, were not granted custody. On December 5, 2010, Jonathan Nice was released from prison after serving 5 years of his 8-year sentence. He moved in with her parents and reunited with her 3 children. He wrote an e-book titled Under the Color of Law: The Deliberate Conviction of an Innocent Man and the Destruction of a Family, to clear his name. On February 5, 2020, Philly Voice reported that federal authorities had charged Jonathan Nice with selling counterfeit drugs to dog owners whose pets were suffering from terminal cancer. He allegedly falsely claimed that these drugs almost always restore the appetite, spirit, and energy of a cancer-stricken dog. He gave the fake treatments realistic-sounding names, Temexal and Natrosone, and claimed that the Food and Drug Administration funded his research. In reality, the drugs were simply random ingredients mixed together, and the FDA had no involvement with them. According to the Justice Department, the scam netted nearly $1 million from approximately 900 victims. In December 2022, a federal jury convicted Jonathan Nice of wire fraud and interstate transportation of misbranded veterinary drugs. He now faces up to 32 years in prison and a substantial fine. October 1, 2020, and the quiet neighborhood of Reedley, just outside Burnley, England, seemed like any other morning. Residents on Colne Road were starting their day, with kids heading to school and folks grabbing their morning coffee. But at 8:45 a.m., a call came into Lancashire Constabulary that would shatter the calm. When officers arrived, they were met with a scene that would haunt them: a home scarred by smoke and fire. Inside, the lifeless bodies of Dr. Saman Mir Sacharvi and her daughter, Vian Mangrio. The discovery sent shockwaves through the community, police scrambling for answers. Dr. Saman was a respected psychiatrist at the Lancaster and South Cumbria NHS Foundation Trust. Vian, a bright student at Marsden Heights High School in nearby Nelson, was known for her academic spark and enthusiasm for life. The two living together in their Colne Road home. But that morning, something had gone horribly wrong. The house showed signs of a big fire, smoke stains on the walls and charred furniture, but the flames hadn't consumed everything. Investigators noted something else: strange messages scrawled on the walls. Cryptic phrases like "my mom is evil" and "this is a cult house." Were these clues to what happened, or something more sinister? The police launched a full-scale investigation, cordoning off the house as forensic teams combed through the wreckage. The scene raised immediate questions. Was this a targeted act? Did the fire start accidentally, or was it set to hide something? And what about those eerie messages on the walls? Detectives began interviewing neighbors, asking if anyone had seen anything unusual in the days leading up to the tragedy. Had Saman or Vian mentioned any trouble? Did they have enemies? Or was there tension in their lives that no one knew about? Someone out there knew what happened, and detectives were determined to find them. Who could have targeted this beloved doctor and her promising daughter? To understand the weight of this true crime tragedy, let's take a moment to know Saman and Vian, who they were, where they came from, and the lives they built in the UK. Dr. Saman Mir Sacharvi was a woman of compassion and intellect. Born in Pakistan to a close-knit family, she was the eldest child and only daughter of her parents, now in their 80s. She was described by her brother as the apple of their eye, cherished for her ambition and warmth. From a young age, Saman excelled academically, and driven by a passion for helping others, she pursued a career in medicine, specializing in psychiatry. Her dedication to mental health defined her professional life. Saman moved to the UK in the early 2000s, settling in Burnley, where she joined the Lancaster and South Cumbria NHS Foundation Trust in February 2020 as a junior doctor in the specialist perinatal community mental health team. Her colleague, perinatal lead consultant, remembered her as approachable, empathetic, and a joy to work with, always forming strong bonds with patients, colleagues alike. During the global issue lockdown, Saman went beyond her duties, personally delivering prescriptions to women isolating at home, ensuring they received care when access was limited. Her kindness left a lasting mark on those she served. Vian Mangrio, Saman's daughter, attended Marsden Heights Community College in Nelson, where she shone as an outstanding student. Her head teacher praised her for having a rare blend of academic talent and enthusiasm for school life. Vian loved art. Her father, Kikip Mangrio, who lives in Doha, Qatar, after divorcing Saman in 2012, was to say that her loss left his life miserable and without purpose. He recalled her as a loving, caring young girl, beloved by everyone. The morning of October 1, 2020, Saman and Vian's bodies were found. This discovery marked the beginning of a complex true crime investigation that revealed a series of alarming events. Just before 8:45 a.m., the Lancaster Constabulary received a call expressing concerns for the safety of the occupants at a semi-detached house on Colne Road. Officers quickly arrived at the location, a quiet street filled with modest homes where Saman and Vian had built their lives. What they encountered there was far from the tranquil suburban morning they had expected. Inside the house, the air was thick with the effects of a fire. Smoke stains covered the walls, and burnt furniture suggested a blaze that had been either put out or failed to spread significantly. The officers proceeded with caution. In the front bedroom upstairs, they discovered the body of Dr. Saman Sacharvi. She was lifeless, evidence indicated she had been involved in a violent struggle. An autopsy revealed that she died from strangulation. She had also been attacked prior to her death. In the upstairs area, there were signs of attempts to start a fire, but it had not successfully ignited, leaving Saman's body only partially affected by the flames. In the lounge downstairs, the situation was more tragic. Vian Mangrio's body was discovered, badly burned, making it hard to identify her right away. The severity of the fire suggested it was intentional, as flames had engulfed much of the area around her. A woolen item was found around her neck and in her mouth. Bruising in her throat indicated that she likely died from asphyxiation. Although the fire damage made it challenging for the pathologist to determine the exact cause of death, the difference between the two locations, Saman upstairs and Vian downstairs, raised important questions. Why were the bodies in separate parts of the house? Was the fire set to destroy evidence, or was it part of a more extensive plan? The officers observed unsettling messages written on the walls. These phrases seemed intentionally misleading. Vian and Saman had recently been isolating since Vian was waiting for a test result, which was ultimately negative. The timing of the messages struck the officers as suspicious. In response, the house was secured. The major crime team from Lancaster Constabulary, led by Detective Superintendent, quickly took over the case, treating the deaths as a double murder investigation from the beginning. The presence of smoke and fire damage, along with the violent circumstances of Saman's death and the condition of Vian's body, indicated that this was a deliberate act rather than an accident. Officers started canvassing the neighborhood, going door to door to ask if anyone had witnessed or heard anything unusual in the days or hours before the discovery. Meanwhile, forensic teams gathered important evidence, finding traces of potent substances in both Saman and Vian's bodies, which suggested they had been incapacitated before their deaths. These substances were later identified in court as a mixture of a sedative, wine, and fruit in a smoothie, pointing to a chilling level of premeditation. The fires also seemed intentional, one in the lounge where Vian was discovered, another in the upstairs bedroom near Saman, and a third in the kitchen, where the police believed a kettle had been ignited to simulate an electrical fire. These details implied that the perpetrator was familiar with the house, having both access and time to arrange the scene. The investigation shifted to focus on Saman and Vian's close associates, people who had been in their home on September 30, 2020, and had the means to commit such a precise act. The discovery of the bodies marked a significant turning point for the police and deeply affected the lives of those who knew Saman and Vian. News spread rapidly through Reedley. By midday, neighbors gathered outside the police perimeter, leaving flowers and condolence notes. The police continued their work tirelessly, aware that every piece of evidence, including footprints and fibers, could bring them closer to solving the case. The investigation was in full progress, with detectives working to create a timeline of events from the previous day. They established that Saman had been at home, likely either working or preparing for the evening. Vian had returned from school around 3:25 p.m. The crucial question was, what occurred during the hours between Vian's return and the discovery of their bodies the following morning? A significant development occurred when detectives examined CCTV footage from Colne Road and surrounding areas. The cameras recorded a man visiting Saman's home on September 30th, arriving at approximately 11:26 a.m. and leaving later that evening. The man was identified as Shahbaz Khan, a 51-year-old handyman from Ribble Avenue in Burnley, who had previously done work at Saman's house. This connection raised concerns, as Khan's visit coincided with the estimated time of the crime. On October 4th, police arrested 51-year-old Khan, who is suspected of murder and arson with intent to endanger life. On October 6th, police obtained a warrant to hold him for an additional 36 hours for further questioning. Detective Superintendent Supt John Holmes urged anyone with information about the incident to contact the police, especially if they have CCTV footage, dash cam recordings, or witness accounts from the Colne Road area. The investigation into Khan intensified when officers searched his home on Ribble Avenue and discovered Saman's jewelry hidden in the loft, suggesting a deeper connection to the victims. Additionally, detectives found a purple Samsung phone at Khan's residence that contained Google searches from September 30th for terms like obsessed and define obsessed, indicating a concerning state of mind. Witness interviews provided important details. A neighbor remembered that Khan had done odd jobs at Saman's house over the years and described him as polite but somewhat reserved. Another neighbor noted that Khan's van was seen parked near Colne Road more often in the weeks before the incident, but there were no reports of suspicious behavior. Family members acknowledged Khan as a trusted handyman, and none suspected him of any wrongdoing. Khan was a father of 5 who originally came from Pakistan and had lived in Burnley for several years. He worked part-time at Tesco and also took on handyman jobs. Previously, in Pakistan, he was a computer network engineer, but in the UK, he focused on various odd jobs, including a garage conversion at Saman's home. This position allowed him to have insight into the family's life. The shocking discovery of £27,000 worth of jewelry hidden in Khan's loft, along with forensic evidence of staged fires and dangerous substances, identified him as the main suspect in this disturbing crime case. During his first interrogation, Khan's statements were confusing and strange. He claimed that a supernatural being attacked him and caused the incidents at Saman House. Prosecutor David McLaughlin later explained to Preston Crown Court that Khan's story was a weak attempt to imply that he was mentally unstable. Khan also claimed that Vian was upstairs while Saman was in the kitchen when he left the house, trying to shift the blame onto the victims or imaginary characters. On October 5th, while in custody, he threw himself across his cell, claiming that a supernatural force had pushed him. Detectives considered this behavior to be a performance rather than a genuine reaction. His claims quickly fell apart under investigation, as forensic evidence showed that the victims had traces of a sedative in their systems, indicating premeditation. Additionally, phone records revealed that Khan's device was active near Colne Road on September 30th, and CCTV footage confirmed that he left the house after 10 p.m., several hours after Vian returned from school at 3:25 p.m. Khan's wife, Rabia Shabazz, 44 years old, complicated the investigation by providing a false alibi. This raised suspicions that Khan may have either confided in her or pressured her to lie. On October 8, 2020, Khan was formally charged with 2 counts of murder and 1 count of arson with intent to endanger life. The charges highlighted the brutality of the crimes. Saman died from pressure to her neck, likely caused by ligature strangulation, and had been assaulted, while Vian's death was due to asphyxiation. Her body was severely burned to hide the evidence of the crime. The arson charge resulted from 3 intentional fires set in a lounge, upstairs bedroom, and kitchen. Prosecutors later explained that Khan was motivated by his obsession with Saman's jewelry. He planned to steal it by using a sedative-laced smoothie to incapacitate both Saman and Vian. When his plan escalated, he turned to violence, strangling Saman and asphyxiating Vian before setting fires to cover his actions. The messages written on the walls were likely attempts to mislead investigators. Although handwriting experts could not definitively connect the graffiti to Khan, its content indicated that he was familiar with the victim's situation during their global issue isolation. As Khan awaited trial, detectives worked diligently to gather and solidify their evidence. The trial commenced on June 14, 2021, at Preston Crown Court. Khan pleaded not guilty to 2 murder charges and 1 charge of reckless arson. His wife, Rabia Shabazz, was charged separately with perverting the course of justice for falsely claiming that Khan had been at home all day on September 30, 2020. The prosecution, led by David McLaughlin, presented a thorough case, arguing that Khan's actions were premeditated, cruel, and motivated by financial gain. McLaughlin dismissed Khan's initial claims of supernatural involvement. Instead, Khan suggested that someone else had entered the house after he left at 10 p.m. Khan claimed that the jewelry in question had been entrusted to him for safekeeping while Saman was away, but the prosecution argued that Khan's intention was theft, which escalated to murder when he was confronted. Khan's defense initially asserted his innocence and indicated that his mental state should be examined. During his testimony, Khan described his relationship with Saman and Vian, referring to Vian as if she were a daughter. He maintained that both victims were alive when he left the house. He also stated that medication had helped clarify his thoughts, retracting the supernatural power story but not providing any credible alternative suspect. On June 29, after 3 weeks of evidence, Khan requested to dismiss the jury, expressing concerns about his mental health. However, the justice denied this request. The following day, June 30th, after being confronted with overwhelming evidence, including CCTV footage, phone records, and jewelry, Khan pleaded guilty to all charges, 2 counts of murder and 1 count of arson. This sudden change took the courtroom by surprise, eliminating the need for the jury to deliberate further but extending the suffering of the victims' families, who had already endured weeks of distressing testimony. Rabia Shabazz's trial continued as she maintained her innocence regarding charges of perverting the course of justice. Her defense argued that she was naive and confused about dates due to stress, lack of sleep, and insufficient food, mistakenly believing Khan was at Tesco on September 30th. In contrast, The prosecution asserted that her false statement made the day after Khan's arrest was a deliberate attempt to protect him. On July 1st, after less than 2 hours of discussion, the jury found her guilty. The sentencing occurred on October 5, 2021. Khan was sentenced to life in prison, with a minimum term of 34 years. The lengthy sentence reflected the premeditated and intentional nature of the murders, which were driven by financial motives. Rabia Shahbaz's attempt to shield her husband, Khan, by providing a false alibi led to her conviction for perverting the course of justice, earning her a 15-month prison sentence. Early in the investigation, a second suspect, a 56-year-old man, was arrested but released without charge, narrowing the focus to Khan. Dr. Saman Mir Sacharvi's legacy endures through her compassionate work at Lancaster and South Cumbria NHS Foundation Trust, where she supported vulnerable patients during the 2020 lockdown, while Vian Mangrio's brilliance at Marsden Heights Community College continues to inspire her peers. Their loss reverberates through Reedley, a reminder of the enduring impact of two remarkable lives cut short on Colne Road. As of May 2025, there have been no significant updates on the case. Khan is currently in prison, serving a life sentence without the possibility of parole. This concludes the tragic story from Burnley, a crime tale that reveals the depths of human greed and the strength of those left behind. Valentine's Day is typically about celebrating love, but for Susan Hamilton, it took a dark turn. As she prepared to leave her house, her hair still wet and fully dressed, everything seemed normal. However, soon after, her husband, Dr. John Hamilton, frantically called 911. When the police arrived, they discovered a shocking scene. As the investigation progressed, inconsistencies in John's account began to surface. Was this attack random, or was it connected to their home life? In Oklahoma City, a love story unfolded that would eventually surprise the entire community. It all began in 1985 when Susan, a devoted single mother and Christian nurse, met Dr. John Hamilton, a well-respected obstetrician and gynecologist. John, a devoted father, instantly felt a strong connection to Susan's kindness. Susan, in turn, appreciated John's supportive nature. 2 years later, they married in 1987, creating what many viewed as an ideal life together. They settled into a beautiful home in an upscale neighborhood, a testament to the success of John's thriving medical practice. Susan chose to leave her nursing job to focus on their marriage and community involvement, quickly becoming a respected figure in both their church and local community. John and Susan Hamilton appeared to live a perfect life. Their relationship seemed filled with joy. They often enjoyed luxurious vacations and romantic outings together. John was particularly generous, showering Susan with expensive gifts like jewelry, luxury cars, including a Porsche, and designer items that highlighted both their wealth. He was attentive and caring, always striving to make Susan feel cherished. Susan, in turn, loved him just as much. Their marriage lasted over 15 years, during which they experienced both shared achievements and private struggles. Despite not having children together, John had a family from an earlier relationship. They remained committed to one another. However, beneath this seemingly perfect life, issues began to arise. What looked like a fairy tale was soon to take a dark and tragic turn. As time went on, John became a key figure in the termination of pregnancy. In addition to delivering babies and addressing women's health issues, he also performed termination of pregnancy at his clinic. This aspect of his work not only faced moral opposition but also posed personal risks. Activists often gathered outside his clinic, holding signs, handing out provocative flyers, spreading his name and photo in attempts to shame or intimidate him. The harassment extended beyond the clinic. It reached his home as well. His wife, Susan, started receiving threatening phone calls. Some of these messages were so alarming that she feared for her safety. Despite living under this shadow of fear, the Hamiltons focused on maintaining their public image. They hosted fancy gatherings, stayed involved in community activities, and appeared to live an enviable life. John consistently showed love and affection for Susan, making every Valentine's Day a special occasion. They followed their cherished tradition of exchanging heartfelt cards and small gifts, keeping the romance alive throughout the years. On the morning of February 14, 2001, John started his day by leaving for work around 7 a.m. to perform surgery at the hospital. He arrived in regular clothes and changed into scrubs. After completing the first procedure at 8:40 a.m., he returned home briefly. John stated that he left a bouquet of flowers and a Valentine's card for Susan before heading back for his second surgery. He mentioned that she was not home at that time. When he returned later that morning, everything had changed. John sensed that something was wrong. The door was slightly open, which was unusual. Inside, the house felt eerily quiet. As he moved through the rooms, he was unprepared for what he found next. In the bathroom, Susan lay on the floor, covered in blood. Her injuries were shocking. She had been strangled with 2 neckties, and her skull had been so severely crushed that brain matter was visible. The murder weapon was never found. In a state of desperation, John called 911, his voice shaking as he pleaded for assistance. He was explaining that he had attempted CPR but was unable to revive her. Emergency responders arrived within minutes to a horrifying scene. Blood was splattered everywhere, indicating a violent struggle. This wasn't just a murder, it seemed excessively brutal. The level of violence suggested that whoever did this must have had deep personal animosity towards Susan. But who could act like that about a woman so loved by everyone? Officers quickly noticed some troubling details at the scene. Both of Hamilton's cars were parked in the driveway. Inside the house, John's shirt and shoes were covered in blood. There were also blood traces in his car. Investigators found the inconsistencies and the signs of extreme violence hard to overlook. Initially, the situation didn't add up. John and Susan appeared to be the perfect couple, loving, successful. Their life resembled a picture from a magazine. However, the reality was much more sinister than anyone had anticipated. By that day, it would no longer represent love. Instead, it would mark the start of a startling investigation that shattered the community's perception of John and Susan Hamilton. Suspicion quickly turned to her husband, Dr. John Hamilton, as he was the last person known to have seen her alive and was the one who found her body. That evening, the police arrested him. From the start, John's behavior was questionable. During the interrogation, he seemed very upset, his hands trembled, he couldn't remain still, and at times he appeared inconsolable. Some believed he was simply overcome with grief, while others thought his reactions seemed staged. His inconsistent behavior made it hard to distinguish between true sorrow and possible guilt. Even though the front door was left open, unusual for their wealthy neighborhood, nothing valuable had been stolen. The house, filled with luxury items like expensive jewelry, electronics, and fine art, remained untouched. Investigators quickly dismissed the idea of robbery. There were no indications of forced entry. However, a small marble figurine was missing from the bathroom. Detectives believed it could have been used to harm Susan, but the figurine was never located. Investigators explored various options due to the lack of a clear motive or external suspects. One theory was that the murder might have been politically motivated. Due to his job, John faced threats and protests. The couple became openly targeted. However, there was no concrete evidence connecting the crime to any of the protesters. No eyewitnesses, no signs of forced entry, and no leads to follow. The key discovery was surprisingly personal, a Valentine's Day card. While searching the Hamilton home, police found a card that Susan had written for John. What seemed like a straightforward love note became significant for investigators. The message said, "I obviously bought this before last Monday, so I guess it doesn't seem appropriate now. I still love you, though. Have a good day, Susan." This raised concerns for detectives. What events occurred the previous Monday? Why did she feel the card was no longer suitable? Questions began to arise. The card's tone, which felt conflicted and detached, sharply contrasted with the loving image they showed to others. Soon, rumors of a hidden truth started to emerge. One of Susan's closest friends informed the police that she suspected John was having an affair. This revelation shattered the image of the devoted husband and revealed something much darker. Susan had confided to her daughter that she felt trapped in her marriage. She described her relationship as one-sided, where everything centered around John. He demanded her attention, ignored her feelings, and made her feel invisible. She even admitted to considering leaving him. The seemingly perfect marriage that the public admired was turning out to be a fragile facade. Detectives investigated further, revealing a more concerning situation. Susan found phone records indicating over 60 calls to the same woman, a stripper from a local club. She printed the records and confronted John, who denied any wrongdoing, claiming the woman was simply a hospital patient. However, Susan was skeptical. She confided in a friend about the confrontation and mentioned she was considering divorce, which may have been the breaking point. As the investigation progressed, it became evident that Susan was getting ready to leave a marriage that no longer fulfilled her. John faced the possibility of losing not only his wife but also his reputation, lifestyle, and perhaps his career. By February 14th, the Valentine's Day traditions that once represented lasting love now hid the painful reality of a crumbling relationship. What used to feel like genuine affection, flowers, a card, might have actually been a frantic attempt to salvage something that had already fallen apart behind their lavish facade. The extravagant gifts and polished public image masked a brewing storm. When it finally erupted, it resulted in a chaotic and deeply personal situation that could no longer be overlooked. As the investigation into Susan Hamilton's brutal murder progressed, a more troubling picture of John Hamilton emerged. Behind his polished image and respected career was a man who desperately wanted to protect his reputation. A pending divorce and a public affair threatened to ruin everything he had built. Initially, John denied any romantic relationship with the woman Susan suspected, insisting she was just a patient. However, the truth eventually surfaced. Investigators found that he had been frequently visiting her at the strip club where she worked, and she had given him private dances. Despite the growing evidence, John maintained that nothing physical had happened between them, but this defense seemed weak. One important detail emerged: John had written a letter to the woman, saying he could no longer be her doctor. While it might seem like he was ending their relationship, it raised questions. Was he trying to regain Susan's trust, or was he manipulating the situation to postpone a divorce? To the police, it appeared to be an attempt at damage control. The media found the story intriguing and became heavily involved, sensing there was more beneath the surface. One local news station even sent the 911 call John made to a voice stress analyst. The results were surprising. The analysis showed his voice had very little stress, uncharacteristic for someone who had just found his wife's mutilated body. This indicated that he wasn't panicked or heartbroken, but rather calm and in control, as if he had rehearsed what to say. The inconsistencies continued to unfold. John told emergency responders that he tried to perform CPR, but investigators were doubtful. They noticed there was no blood on his mouth or face. Given the severity of Susan's head injuries, if he had genuinely attempted to resuscitate her, he would likely have been covered in blood. Instead, evidence indicated otherwise. Forensic analysis showed that the blood found on John's shirt and shoes belonged to Susan. Even more incriminating was the discovery of her blood and tissue inside his car, which was much more than initially thought. John claimed he moved his car to give paramedics space, but this explanation fell apart when examined closely. The presence of tissue fragments suggested that Susan had been in the car after she was injured or that John had moved evidence after the murder. The blood pattern found on John's clothing did not support his account of the events. Instead of suggesting he was an innocent bystander trying to help, the evidence indicated he was directly involved in the violence. The investigators' theory was disturbing. In a fit of rage or desperation, John tried to strangle Susan with his ties. When she fought back, he became more violent. He hit her in the head with a blunt object, possibly the missing marble figurine. After she fell, he violently crushed her skull. This was not a random act or a robbery, it was a personal and brutal murder driven by overwhelming anger. Evidence against John was piling up: the affair, blood evidence, stress analysis, the missing figurine, and a motive rooted in ego, pride, and a fear of shame. Their marriage had been troubled long before that tragic day. On the morning of the murder, John returned home after his first surgery, not just to drop off flowers and a Valentine's card as he had claimed, but to confront Susan. The argument that ensued would end their marriage in a horrific way. The timeline shows that Susan was getting ready to leave for a 9:30 a.m. appointment with a friend. She was found not to be wearing clothes, with damp hair. Detectives found an important detail in John's hospital schedule. His second surgery was supposed to start at 9 a.m., but he didn't arrive until 9:38. The staff had even sent someone to search for him because of his delay. During those 30 unexplained minutes, John had the opportunity to commit the murder. He thought he would have more time to clean up, but a sudden call back to the hospital interrupted him. In a panic, he changed out of his blood-stained clothes and returned to work just in time for surgery, appearing calm, focused, and professional as if nothing had happened. Hours later, when he called 911, he acted devastated. However, for investigators, the truth was already starting to come out. The close distance of their home to the hospital was crucial to the case, showing that John could have committed the crime and still returned in time for surgery. More importantly, it ruled out the possibility that someone else had entered the house in the brief window between John's departure and Susan's planned outing. There simply wasn't enough time for another person to commit the crime without being noticed. During the trial preparations, John's defense team decided to hire a blood spatter expert to evaluate the evidence. However, this decision proved to be detrimental for John's case. While testifying, the expert was asked if the prosecution had missed anything important, and he revealed a shocking finding. He had identified blood stains on the inside sleeve of John's shirt that matched patterns consistent with blunt force trauma. Although he was brought in to support the defense, the expert could not ignore the facts. His analysis confirmed the prosecution's suspicions. The blood must have been there at the exact moment Susan was attacked. This revelation dealt a devastating blow to John Hamilton's defense. In the courtroom, the evidence revealed a disturbing story of deliberate anger. The reasons behind John's actions were evident. The jury acted quickly. John Hamilton was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without the chance of parole. He was also required to pay over $11,000 for his incarceration expenses. John is currently incarcerated at the Dick Connor Correctional Center in Hominy, Oklahoma. This case was unprecedented in the county and had a significant impact. John has submitted several appeals, all of which have been rejected. He has consistently claimed that he did not commit the murder. Even now, he insists on his innocence, and a dedicated group of supporters believes he was wrongly convicted. However, the question persists: was justice achieved, or is there more to this story than people understand? Did John Hamilton deserve a life sentence, or was this situation based on circumstantial evidence that was misinterpreted? In July 2009, 55-year-old Gloria Huerta Marmolejo vanished without a trace from her home in El Paso, Texas. The day before her disappearance, she had unexpectedly returned from a trip and discovered something in her house that she had likely suspected for a long time. Just hours later, all contact with her was lost. No calls, no messages, no clues. When her son suggested that she might have just gone away for a while, the rest of the family grew concerned. Gloria was not the type to leave without telling anyone. A few days later, her car was found abandoned, and her belongings had been neatly left at home. What started as a typical missing person case soon revealed a chilling truth about long-hidden relationships, a double life, and a betrayal that turned deadly. El Paso is located in the far western part of Texas, right on the border with Mexico. It's known for its mix of cultures, its tense border atmosphere, and its higher crime rates. Despite its rough reputation, generations of families have built their lives there, holding tightly to traditions, loyalty, and the Sunday gatherings that bring everyone together. It was here, on July 28, 1955, that Gloria Marmolejo was born. She grew up in a large, close-knit family of Mexican heritage, where support, family ties, and deep loyalty were passed down through the years. In the early 1970s, Gloria met Armando Marmolejo. He won her over quickly, and by October 11, 1975, they were married. Gloria poured her heart into the relationship, never allowing anyone to speak poorly about her husband and always ready to stand by his side. They had 2 sons, Manny first, then David a few years later. At first, their family life seemed like a model of stability, a house, sons, holidays, and day-to-day life together. However, after David was born, Armando took a job that supposedly required constant travel. He was home less and less until he seemed to disappear entirely. No one really knew what he was doing or where he was going. His business trips were shrouded in secrecy, even relatives were left in the dark. By the time David turned about 6, their father was rarely around. In April 1995, Gloria made the divorce official. Armando moved to a different state, cut off contact with Manny and David. Gloria didn't let this break her spirit. She accepted the situation and focused on raising her sons. According to her brother, she had a different relationship with each of them, tailored to their personalities and needs. As Manny and David grew older, they began to drift apart. Each took his own path and followed his own interests, which was a natural part of life. Manny settled into a steady routine, while David frequently changed his priorities and directions. Gloria, after years of pouring herself into family life, eventually refused to sink into loneliness. At 50, she made a big change. She left her job of 27 years, went back to school, and earned a degree in management. She became a real estate agent, a job that provided her not just with an income, but also with a sense of purpose. It offered her flexible hours and the chance to be in control of her own time. Life eventually settled into a comfortable routine. The house where Gloria lived was tidy, well kept, and surrounded by a garden she loved to care for. She spent her time reading, enjoying the fresh air, and seemed to have found the peace she had always longed for. But everything changed suddenly. One of Gloria's neighbors, an elderly man she had known for years, became seriously ill. His adult son came to take care of him. After the son's arrival, Gloria began noticing some odd things happening. She often saw someone watching her from behind the bushes that bordered their yards. The man would hide, never getting too close, but his stare felt invasive and unsettling. Once, she even saw him holding what looked like a phone or camera, clearly recording her. This wasn't a one-time incident, it happened repeatedly. The sense of safety Gloria had always felt in her home was gone. She tried not to panic, but the tension kept building. Despite everything, she never went to the police. Part of her held back out of compassion for her sick neighbor. She worried that involving the authorities might make things worse. Another part of her felt it was better to wait, to observe, and to avoid making any sudden moves. Rather than contacting the police, she decided to call her brother Mark. She explained the situation clearly and shared her anxiety about it. She asked him to stay connected in case things got worse. While she didn't want to create unnecessary drama, she thought it was important for him to be informed. After that call, the thought of moving began to occupy her mind more frequently. Her sons moved out a long time ago. Manny is now living in Phoenix, and David has also moved to a new location. Although life in El Paso had always seemed stable and familiar, it was starting to feel uncertain. However, moving would mean leaving the home where she had rebuilt her life after her divorce, raised her sons, and rediscovered herself. It was not just a house, it was a part of her story. Leaving felt like relinquishing her past, whereas staying meant enduring ongoing anxiety. Over time, her thoughts of moving evolved into a quiet certainty, signaling that significant changes were approaching. To truly understand what happened, we need to look back at David, Gloria's younger son, during his early childhood. From a young age, David stood out from his classmates, not because he was academically inclined or well-behaved, but because he had a talent for getting into trouble. He found school uninteresting, disliked doing chores, and resisted any attempts to guide him. Unlike his brother Manny, who loved sports and eagerly embraced learning, David chose a different path. He was carefree, ignored school rules, and was always preoccupied with girls. David was restless, never committed to any activity for long. His interests were superficial and constantly changing. It was evident that his main priorities were his appearance, popularity, and the attention he received from girls. Relatives noted that even in his teenage years, he enjoyed being the focus of everyone's attention. He knew how to leverage his good looks, confidence, and charm. While his classmates were still learning about dating, David behaved as if he had everything under control. He felt entitled to attention, viewed girls as just another aspect of his life. This sense of entitlement and inflated self-esteem became defining characteristics of his identity. At the age of 16, he began dating a girl, who became his official girlfriend. However, he still spent time with other girls. To his family and friends, he presented his girlfriend as his serious partner, while secretly, he was seeing other people. She was 2 years younger than him and became pregnant at just 15. This unexpected situation changed everything. Suddenly, David felt he needed to take responsibility. He dropped out of school, found a job, and proposed to her. His decision surprised everyone, even Gloria. Despite her initial shock, Gloria supported David through this difficult time. She accepted his girlfriend as part of the family and quickly offered help with the new baby. After the birth of their first son, they welcomed 3 more children. Gloria played a vital role, helping to raise her grandchildren, managing the household, and providing financial support. The young family lived with her, and once again, Gloria became the center of the home. It felt like she was experiencing motherhood all over again. This time as a grandmother, she dedicated herself to the role with the same passion. Despite his family's encouragement, David struggled to find stability in his life. He changed jobs frequently, never staying in one place for long and showing little desire to advance in any career. At one point, he received a job offer from a construction company in Phoenix, Arizona. This opportunity seemed appealing, as it offered better pay and a chance to reunite with his older brother, Manny, who was already living there. Additionally, their father, Armando, had contacted him after years of no communication, and he, too, was living in Phoenix. The decision to move happened quickly. His partner and the kids joined him. For David, this was a chance to start over, improve his finances, strengthen his relationship with Manny, and possibly reconnect with Armando, something he never thought would be possible. Once in Arizona, David was surrounded by family again, despite the changes. Armando was now living with a partner and raising 2 younger kids, Jonathan and Mariah. Mariah looked up to her older brothers, especially David. To her, he seemed mature, confident, and like a hero she admired. She spent a lot of time at their house, playing with her nephews and helping out. His partner, busy taking care of 4 kids, appreciated the extra help. The family bonds appeared to be getting stronger. During this time, hidden issues were starting to surface beneath the appearance of normal life. Mariah was becoming more involved in David's daily routine, and no one realized how harmful that relationship could be. Mariah, David's younger half-sister, quickly became a constant presence in his life. However, as Mariah matured, David's partner began to notice unsettling changes in David's behavior around Mariah. While everything appeared fine on the surface, she felt that something wasn't right. Their interactions, the way they spoke to each other, the small gestures, their closeness, seemed excessive. Although it could be dismissed as family affection, she couldn't shake her growing unease. She hesitated to make any assumptions, thinking that maybe her concerns were just a result of her own stress and exhaustion. When David got a job offer in Hawaii, he moved there by himself. When Mariah was around 15 or 16, David invited her to spend the summer in Hawaii. At first, everyone thought it was a normal family trip with her brother, his partner, and their children. However, after a few weeks, David's partner began to notice unsettling signs. She saw the way David and Mariah looked at each other and spoke. These little things didn't feel right. What started as a vague concern gradually turned into real suspicion. One day, she walked in on them in the bedroom. Disturbed by what she witnessed, she immediately called Gloria. For Gloria, this news was shocking and heartbreaking. The idea that something inappropriate might be happening between her son and his young half-sister was unbearable. She demanded that it must end immediately, and Mariah was sent back home to Texas right away. The incident did not become public and had no formal repercussions, but it changed the dynamics within the family. Gloria lost trust in her son. Although she tried to act normally, she recognized that this was not just a simple mistake, it felt like a significant threat. The bond of trust was broken. The once strong family ties began to deteriorate quickly. A serious argument erupted between mother and son. Gloria expressed her disapproval openly, criticized David's actions, demanded he cut off all contact with Mariah, and made it clear she wouldn't accept anything like this again. David denied everything, claiming there was no relationship and accusing others of blowing things out of proportion. However, Gloria did not believe him. Her life experiences, cautious nature, and that unique maternal instinct told her that this situation was much more serious than David was willing to acknowledge. After Mariah returned to Texas, the family faced another crisis. David was involved in a serious motorcycle accident on one of Hawaii's winding roads. He lost control of his bike and unfortunately had to have one of his legs amputated. When Gloria found out, she rushed to Hawaii, putting aside any previous disagreements. In that moment, all conflicts were forgotten. Her son needed her, and she responded like any caring mother would. During David's recovery, Gloria stayed with him in the hospital, helping him adapt to his new physical limitations and providing unwavering support. David shared with others that his mother never left his side, always holding his hand, encouraging him, and doing everything possible to help him feel complete despite his loss. After a long rehabilitation, Gloria suggested that David come back to El Paso with her. David agreed, as his relationship with his partner was over and he had little contact with his sons. Returning to his mother appeared to be his only choice. However, Gloria had one strict condition: he must have no contact with Mariah. If he complied, she promised to keep everything that had happened a secret and allow him a chance to start anew. David accepted the condition, and they went back to Texas. Gloria resumed her daily routines, helping her son adjust to his new life, while staying watchful. On the surface, things seemed stable. David appeared calm, contributing around the house and not causing any concerns. After enduring so much chaos, Gloria finally felt like she was regaining control. The neighbor who had been watching her from the bushes still lived next door, which made her uncomfortable. However, now that David was back home, she felt more secure. Even with the tension between them, just having a man around made her feel less exposed. It seemed like the worst was behind her, but her worries lingered. Deep down, she sensed that the situation with Mariah might not be resolved. While everything appeared calm on the outside, Gloria couldn't shake the feeling that a threat was still present. She remained vigilant, scrutinizing every encounter and doubting whether her son had genuinely changed. When David's condition improved and he could care for himself, Gloria decided to take a short trip. Her older son, Manny, had been inviting her to visit him in Phoenix for a long time, and now that her younger son seemed stable, she agreed to go. Before leaving, she asked David to look after the house. At first glance, everything appeared to be fine. He stayed in El Paso, maintained the house, and seemed to follow her instructions. However, while she was in Arizona, Gloria's unease grew. The doubts she had tried to ignore became more persistent. She confided in her brother Mark and asked him to check on David to make sure everything was all right and that Mariah wasn't visiting him. Mark promised to check in, but based on her feelings, Gloria suspected he hadn't actually done much to follow through. Gloria's worries continued to grow until she made the sudden decision to return home unexpectedly. When she arrived, she was shocked by what she found. The house, which had always been clean and organized, was now a total mess, with dirt and clutter everywhere. The most alarming discovery was the locked door to her bedroom, which had a new lock she had never seen before. Anxiously, Gloria called David to ask what was happening. He responded that he was at the movies and would return soon. She waited for him. When David finally came home, they got into a heated argument. Gloria accused him of being disrespectful, breaking his promises, and allowing the house to fall into disarray. David tried to defend himself, saying he would help her pack for a trip back to Phoenix and that he had gone back to the movies afterward. Later that evening, on July 25th, Manny began to feel anxious. He hadn't heard from his mother since she left his house that morning. Despite calling and texting her, he received no replies. He then tried to contact David. Initially, David didn't answer, but as midnight approached, he finally returned Manny's call. David informed Manny that Gloria had come by, they had an argument, and he helped her pack. She likely returned to Phoenix. However, as the night turned into morning, Gloria still hadn't appeared at Manny's place or reached out to any family members. Her phone was off, and there were no messages from her. By the next day, July 26th, it was clear that something was seriously wrong. Manny called David again, but David seemed distant and unhelpful, repeatedly claiming he didn't know anything. His lack of concern was unsettling, making Manny even more convinced that something was amiss. By July 27th, Gloria had been missing for 2 days. Manny contacted everyone he could think of, family, friends, and neighbors, but no one had seen her. It felt like she had disappeared completely. Eventually, he decided to call the police, but they told him that the missing person report needed to come from the last person who saw her, which was David. Soon after, other family members, including Gloria's mother and her brother Conrad, arrived at the house. David greeted them at the door, appearing calm and somewhat indifferent. After much convincing, he finally agreed to go to the police and file a report about Gloria's disappearance. On July 28th, Manny and his wife arrived in El Paso to find something was wrong. As soon as Manny entered the house, he noticed that Gloria's suitcase was in the corner, untouched, and her makeup bag had not been opened. It became clear that she hadn't gone anywhere. She had vanished unexpectedly, without packing or informing anyone. David's explanation about helping her pack didn't make sense since her belongings were still there. Additionally, his behavior was unsettling. He seemed calm and detached, not asking questions or showing any signs of concern. Manny pressed David for details about the last time he saw their mother. David showed Manny some text messages from Gloria, in which she asked him to unlock the door for her. Then, unexpectedly, he added a new part to his story. He claimed that after leaving the house, he went to a party at a woman's house, and later that night, went to a club with another woman. He said he didn't return home until around 3 a.m. During their conversation about their mother, David made a comment that raised alarm. He said he worried they might find traces of his DNA on her. After all, he hugged and kissed her. This statement was confusing, especially since Gloria was reported missing, and no one had suggested anything more serious. The following day, July 29th, local detectives brought in the family members for questioning. David repeated his story, but this time he altered some details. He no longer mentioned going to the movies. Instead, he said he spent the whole evening at the party. A woman confirmed his presence, stating he arrived between 7 and 8 p.m., stayed until midnight, and seemed tense. She did not mention anything about him going to a club with another woman. On that same day, troubling news emerged. Gloria's car was discovered abandoned near an elementary school in El Paso. Her personal items, purse, keys, and phone, were still inside, but there was no sign of Gloria. This changed the investigation from a missing person case to a potential crime, and the Violent Crimes Unit took over. Officers began canvassing the neighborhood. Several residents reported seeing Gloria's car leave the garage on the morning of July 26th. One witness was confident that she had seen Gloria driving. However, another neighbor had a different account. He stated that he saw a young, light-skinned woman with short blonde hair behind the wheel, and he noticed what appeared to be a man's silhouette in the back seat. This was the first solid evidence suggesting that someone other than Gloria had driven her car after she disappeared. The police searched the house and found bloodstains in the garage, mostly on the door of a built-in cabinet. Although there wasn't a large amount, it appeared fresh, leading them to classify the house as a potential crime scene. This discovery prompted detectives to question David more intensively. His accounts were inconsistent, with discrepancies even in basic facts. He struggled with the timeline, frequently changed the order of events, and introduced new details each time he spoke. Throughout the questioning, he remained unusually calm, showing no concern or asking questions about the investigation, which raised suspicions. The police analyzed the blood samples and began collecting DNA from family members. Manny noticed his brother's strange behavior and couldn't stop thinking about Mariah. He felt uneasy about the close relationship between her and David, leading him to urge the police to consider Mariah as a possible suspect, especially given David's partner's previous comments. Investigators examined cell phone data, which revealed important findings. Records show that David made a call between 1:30 and 1:40 a.m. on the night of July 25th to 26th. His phone was located almost 4 miles away from where Gloria's car was found. Additionally, there were several calls between David's and Mariah's phones from 5:30 to 6 a.m., both incoming and outgoing. These inconsistencies, combined with witness statements, changing stories, and digital evidence, suggested that Gloria's disappearance was not an accident and that she did not leave on her own. The investigation had clearly turned into a criminal case, with David and Mariah being the last known individuals to have seen Gloria alive. On July 31st, a woman walking her dog found Gloria's body in the desert in Santa Teresa, New Mexico. The body had started to decompose. Her head was covered with 2 layers, first with plastic and then with a paper bag. Her left leg and arms were also wrapped in plastic. Investigators quickly realized that whoever committed this crime attempted to conceal any biological evidence, suggesting a deliberate act rather than a spontaneous one. The medical examiner determined that Gloria died from suffocation. Her broken larynx indicated that significant physical force was used, showing that the perpetrator had complete control over the situation. This was not a reckless act, it was a calculated and brutal attack. Lab results started to arrive, revealing that the blood samples found in Gloria's garage belonged to Mariah. This discovery made Mariah a key figure in the investigation. Gloria's brother, Mark, informed detectives that before Gloria vanished, she had confided in him her suspicions about David and Mariah having an inappropriate relationship, which she strongly disapproved of. Mariah and David were questioned about their whereabouts on the night of July 25th to 26th. They stated they had spent the entire night together, but cell phone records contradicted this. David's phone made a call at 1:37 a.m., which was almost 4 miles away from where Gloria's body was found later. Additionally, there were calls between David and Mariah at 5:30 and 6 a.m. If they were together the whole night, why did they call each other? Under pressure from investigators, Mariah started to change her story. Eventually, she was offered a deal. She would receive full immunity if she provided the complete truth about what happened. She accepted the offer. Mariah explained that Gloria unexpectedly returned home and discovered her there. This led to a heated argument between Gloria and her son. Gloria insisted that Mariah leave at once and never return. At that moment, Mariah claimed that David lost his temper and became violent, resulting in Gloria's tragic death. Following this, David contacted Mariah to ask for her assistance in covering up the incident. They cleaned the scene to eliminate any evidence and placed Gloria's body in her car, then drove it out of the city. Mariah also confessed that the blood found in a garage belonged to her, as it was from a prior altercation with David. When David buried Gloria, Mariah stated that she was present nearby. Her confession was a crucial turning point in the investigation. On September 4, 2009, David was arrested and faced charges of causing serious harm, hiding evidence, and destroying evidence. The trial began in May 4, 2010. Mariah, who had been given immunity, testified against him. She revealed that their relationship began when she was 14 and he was 29. A startling detail was that she had a child with David, who was later put up for adoption. This information surprised even those who were aware of their relationship. Many family members were unaware of the complete story. Some remained silent while others never suspected anything wrong. Investigators provided more evidence, but no DNA from David was found on Gloria's body. The defense claimed that the case relied on circumstantial evidence. David remained calm and composed in court, occasionally becoming emotional, but consistently insisted on his innocence. The first trial ended without a clear verdict because the jury was unable to reach a unanimous decision. To prevent local bias, it was decided to move the trial to San Antonio. July 10, 2010, David Marmolejo was charged with murdering his mother. In 2011, resulting in David being found guilty and sentenced to 54 years in prison. However, the situation continued to evolve. David was extradited to Arizona in December 2016 to face the crimes he committed against escort service. He is awaiting retrial at the Maricopa County Jail, where he has been held since December 8, 2016. David Marmolejo now faces 29 charges, including 15 counts of abuse assault, 4 counts of armed robbery with a deadly weapon, 4 counts of aggravated assault, 2 counts of abuse, and 4 counts of kidnapping. He initially denied the charges, but his story began to change when a Phoenix detective presented him with evidence. Marmolejo has denied the abuse assault but admitted to picking up approximately 11 escort services during his time in Phoenix. After his arrest in 2006, Marmolejo was reportedly charged with 4 counts of kidnapping, 4 counts of armed robbery, and 10 counts of abuse assault. However, the case was dismissed because 3 of the women could not be found, and the 4th refused to cooperate. Enjoying her freedom, she went to live with her mother. To avoid a life sentence, he made a plea deal with prosecutors, admitting guilt to 6 of the charges while the others were dismissed. Gloria dedicated her life to raising her sons and did everything she could to pull David back from the edge. In the end, he was the one who destroyed everything she had worked so hard to build. The tragic loss of Gloria Huerta Marmolejo revealed the devastating consequences of betrayal within a family she fought to protect. Her unwavering dedication to her sons, especially David, could not shield her from his descent into violence. Convicted of her murder and facing further charges in Arizona, David's actions shattered the bonds Gloria cherished. Her story serves as a haunting reminder that even the strongest love cannot always mend a broken soul, leaving behind a legacy of grief and a call for vigilance against hidden dangers in those closest to us.